Good afternoon. The February State Board work session will now come to order. Denise, please call the roll.
Rachel Wise.
Here.
Lily Larson.
Present.
Glenn Flint.
Here.
John Witzel.
Here.
Molly O'Halloran.
Present.
Patricia Tim. Maureen Nichols.
Here.
Patrick McPherson.
Present.
Commissioner Bloomstead.
Present.
7 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website, www.education.ne.gov/stateboard. Board members, please remember to engage your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you are finished speaking, and please turn off personal cell phones. Okay, we will move to our board reports, dates, and discussion items. And again, we've got quite a bit on the agenda today, so I think what we're going to do is just kind of go around the room and have folks update on some of the visits and activities they've been involved in since our January board meeting. And so we'll just start, Lily, and go right around. Lily, what are some of the activities that you've been involved in since our January board meeting?
I did attend the Martin Luther King breakfast with the commissioner.
Microphone.
I think it's on.
Oh,
It was on. Repeating, I did attend the Martin Luther King breakfast with the commissioner. And once again, in Lincoln, that particular event is extremely well attended. Probably, 500-600 people attended it. And also had the opportunity just this past Sunday to attend the NSBA dinner, legislative dinner, where past Speaker Senator Adams spoke in regard to the role of assessments in the schools and getting the best information you can regardless of what the assessment is that you use, and that it benefits students. And I'm going to put in my 2 cents worth here. Testing should only be done if it benefits the student. And basically, in my opinion, I agree with Senator Adams. Thank you.
Molly?
I went to the NASB dinner the night before, and then the next day I attended the sessions with a local education association representatives. What I found really interesting about the meeting was always reflected in equity and access for all kids, and their terminology is the whole child. And they were particularly interested in behavioral health as it integrates with that child's activities in school, success, and then following up as they move back, as citizens in their communities. One other thing that was just amazing is in the morning we had some awesome speakers. Governor Ricketts started off, and I found it interesting, the speakers focused on money, on the budget, which of course we don't talk all the time because we aren't in charge of money. But Governor Ricketts really did reflect that he has been hearing from his constituents the need to reduce property tax. It's just overwhelming, and Nebraska is ranked so high. And there's also a part about, and this relates to us as board members, that the farmers, I guess, are 4th in the nation. Did you know that our taxes for ag is 4th in the nation? And we're like 10th for general property tax. So the thing that kind of concerned me, though, they weren't talking about where they're going to replace that. They're putting a lid at 3% in the local education associations. And with that lid in place, they have to go back to a vote of the people if they want to use more money. And some of them are already hitting that $5 lid anyway. So a lot of the local education members were really concerned that without state aid to education increasing, that they will bump against that lid and not be able to do what they need to do, and especially in the next biennium. Then also Senator Sullivan came in and did a good presentation, and she seems to be working with Senator Glore from Grand Island, and they really went in to try to even out some of the conversation about, it was really about the budget. And I don't know, I would say I'm glad we're monitoring, and Brian is not in the room, but he's really prepared as well. And I would like you to refer to the legislative issues that came with this meeting. Thank you for letting me go, and I did get home.
And back. So,
And
thank
back.
you. John?
Well done to First Five for the forum they organized and on the 21st of January in regards to having Sam Meisel and a few of the other, if you will, leaders for early childhood development give a noon presentation and questions and answers. Thank you very much. Also, I was blessed to have a meeting with Dr. Mary Hawkins at Bellevue University. Her discussion revolved around possibly creating a secondary education degree program for Bellevue. And also, she was very, very interested in working with NDE in regards to ideas for long-distance learning. Apparently, they have a lot of long-distance learning with a lot of the Nebraska community colleges located throughout the state, and they were very progressive with their operations. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Pat?
Like John, I attended the First Five luncheon. In addition to that, I had the opportunity to listen to Miriam Grossman on the sex education issue in Omaha. I attended an OPS board meeting. I also had the opportunity to spend some time with the governor and talked a little bit about AQuest, and he's got a couple concerns that he shared with me. And I had an opportunity to also sit down for quite a while with Senator Kittner and we discussed some issues regarding the Department of Education. So I guess that pretty well covers it. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Glenn?
I joined Lily and Molly at the NASB dinner on Sunday, and Greg Adams was a great speaker and gave us a lot to think about, challenges to address and as we go forward. So that was a good time.
Maureen?
I actually don't have anything to report other than doing a lot of reading. I had hoped to go to the January 21st with First Five, but was unable to because of health, so I missed it. Was sorry to.
And it was a good presentation. I was able to attend that as well. And I've spent a little more time again. I want to give a shout out to our career and tech ed folks, to Rich Cott, to Brian and to Corey, the 10 schools that are involved in my area in the revisioning process. Continued to have 2 more sessions and a ESU planning session, and just really exciting to listen to kind of the creativity that's coming from those rural schools to think about how do we look at career and tech ed from a different perspective, and how can we collaborate and partner in some perspective. So if there is nothing else from our travels, the next item is the updates for meeting attendance, and I believe you have in e-meetings some of the requests that are coming up. So we've got a P16 World Language meeting coming up on February 12th. I think Lily is planning to go to that. There is the Braille Challenge on February 10th in Nebraska City. I don't know if anyone has signed up for that. Lily signed up for that, and I think we all got the invitation to that as well. Thinking down the road, Maureen, I think you just sent in a request to attend an early childhood.
Yes, in York, in March.
Okay.
But I'm also hoping to get to the Braille.
Okay. Braille Challenge.
Friends who have youngsters that are going blind.
Okay. And that's an exciting regional Braille Challenge that's happening in Nebraska City at the School for the Visually Impaired, and it does sound like a very exciting activity. Also, I think we have some from last month that are coming up the end of February that are attending the Nebraska Association of the Gifted. I think that's up at the end of the month that people have signed up for that, and we voted on many of those last month. NERCSA is coming up March 17th through 18th in Kearney. And so we need to be thinking about a presentation, probably will be on Thursday, and to see who's available and who can attend NERCSA. So we'll get that information out and make sure you so Molly is going to attend NERCSA, and NERCSA is the Nebraska Rural and Community Schools Association. And typically we have a time for a session during that conference. So be looking at your calendars to see if you can attend NERCSA. We will be acting on those requests tomorrow. If you have any other requests, please make sure you get them in before tomorrow so we can act on those. Next, we'll move on to item 3, which is monthly board travel expense report. Commissioner Bloomstead, did you want to address that report?
I believe we have it all updated in the system. I'm going to double check, and maybe we had a couple. Double checking my paper copy versus this one. So it's all up in there, and we'll add the NERCSA pieces to that, and we'll add anything else
That's
that
upcoming.
maybe, is upcoming. So
And then the travel expense report is the report also that's been updated, I think, in there.
right.
So, all right, let's move on to item 3, which is Commissioner's Report and Agenda Overview. Commissioner Bloomstead.
Yes, I'll give a little bit of a overview. First, I'll do my kind of routine on the consent agenda. If you saw anything on the consent agenda that you had questions about, let me know. Fill out the pink form and get that to Margaret, and then we'll organize staff if you had any other questions about that as well. I did want to take just a few minutes to walk through not just what we have going on today, but really kind of this is our first meeting after we've been completely reorganized. The first meeting where we were sitting down with kind of our new committee structures and things along those lines. So I thought I'd present a little bit of that overview for you. I have quite a bit of work ahead of us in this coming year. I mean, obviously with strategic plan, Don will come up a little later and give a little update on that. The new kind of structures of committees, I thank you today. I was trying to pay attention to what was happening in the committees, but also the conversations about where we're going. You notice we included some different staff than we have before. Part of my goal is to make sure that we are engaging our staff across the department to increase our capacity for the work that we have in front of us. You know that we have work in front of us relative to AQuest. You feel like, well, we just got done with that. Well, guess what? We have to press forward, think about the types of changes. So I hope it was at least somewhat clear. We tried to do the best that we could, that reviewing the EBA tenant by tenant is largely about getting us to a decision point about what types of changes, if any types of changes that we're going to make in EBA, be thoughtful about that process and start to roll out a plan for the second year of AQuest, and making sure that we're thoughtful about that, making sure that we're engaging you in that. We will be engaging our committees. We didn't have the Data and Continuous Improvement Committee meet this time, but we will be organizing to meet on that. There's data to look at, by the way, around the EBA, but there's other data that I think we want to talk about for the long run. I think we had some good conversations today. I know we'll talk about a little bit more, but it gives us a sense of the work that we have ahead of us. Kind of on some of that work, we have a lot of organizational work going on across the agency as well, and certainly I'll point out we're looking at how we reshape our administrative memorandums, which are really the policies of how the agency runs. And Dr. Swisher is working with our legal team and others across the floor to actually take what have become AMs, which almost seem hard to read if you're a staff member at the Department of Education. I want to make them clear that they're policies, procedures, and then how those things function. At the same point in time, as our policy committee continues to do work, that I want those things to be really well aligned, that our systems come together, that the purposes and role and all of our processes really function and work well together. And so that work is ongoing. When I think through really our opportunities ahead of us, besides the strategic plan, we have the lottery grant program that we've been asked to come up with a way to disperse funds. And I forget the exact dollar amount, probably will change, but quite a few funds that help us shape a direction of the types of innovations that might take place across the state in those grants. So we have a staff team working on that. That's something that we'll be bringing in front of you sometime this spring, I would say, maybe next month, maybe the month after, relative to the process that would be used for that overall. Also, just a lot, I know there's a lot of conversations around where we go with assessment, and it's a pretty substantial issue for us. We saw legislatively, I suspect the assessment committee will have some report of those conversations. But when you start to shape up this work, there's decision points along the way for the board. My hope and my purposes of this are that our processes work committee by committee, so you have information in front of you, ultimately to make decisions that we see coming down the pike. What I imagine by the time we get to next month is there's some clarity around what our decisions are. We have our budget processes starting right now. I know we had a little big conversation of that in the policy committee, but the budget process is starting right now. It's an important part of our strategic planning. We have communications things going on right now. We're looking at how we revamp our website and have a better website that meets our current needs, looking at how we do data display in the long run. And so there's a lot of this that I think is really critical over between now and say summertime, when we're wrapping up strategic planning, that we're ready to roll with some efforts that support us carrying out the vision and direction that you come up with through that strategic planning process. So quite an exciting time, quite a bit of work. We had a little interruption in our work this week. I shared that with you by email. Our power went out here in this building. And it's fascinating because you actually, in those moments, you find weaknesses in how communications work. You find the dynamics of how state government maybe could do a little bit better in thinking about how we talked with one another. Fortunately, we got through those things. People showed up the next day. The power was on. But those are all little learning experiences. Sometimes you don't plan all of those. So I appreciate just a little opportunity to update you on that front. I will be, I wanted to introduce Rex File, who's the Blair superintendent here representing Stance. And Stance is always very good about having someone here, and so I thank Rex for being here today. So with that, I'll kind of go to my next one to report on rules, if that's all right. Yes. So we will have several rules in front of you tomorrow. I think you probably know those pretty well. We try to do the update. Thanks to Brenda Widd for her work of kind of organizing this memo that really keeps that information in front of you. We'll have presentations to the work session on the rules that are in front of you this time. So if you have any questions on that, we can proceed at that point. With that, I'd have Donlin come up and chat a little bit about some of the work on her plate and the strategic planning efforts.
Thank you. As Dr. Bloomstead said, the snow kind of put a little kink into our plans for the week, and our state board steering committee wasn't able to meet with FSG, but nonetheless, the contract has been signed. The process has begun, and it's going to be a 19-week, really intensive process. But then again, as Mr. McPherson pointed out in our committee meeting, it's a 10-year plan, and so there'll be an implementation phase as well. So the next few months are going to be busy and exciting, and right now we're considered to be in the first phase of the project. And so one of the pieces to that is to interview each of you as a state board member. And they have sent me a suggested time frame for when you could sign up to have an interview, a phone interview with them. So during the break, catch me. I will have you sign up for a time that you could be interviewed and a number that they can call you at. And a part of what they'll collect there, then they want to use with you to help do what's called a visioning session. And that will be a 3-hour process on the next work session day in the morning. So they're starting to collect information already, and then they want to bring the entire board together to work with for about 3 hours. So that will be on March, I think it's the 3rd, which is that Thursday morning. So you'll get all of that information. But again, catch me during the break so I can get you signed up for when you can interview with them on your phone interview. And then the other big piece is, as Dr. Bloomstead said, between President Wise and Dr. Bloomstead, we now have our full committee, well, pretty much our full committee list, and then a staff lead named for each committee. And I did send that out to you, but I will resend it. And also, is it helpful for me to put those kinds of things on e-meetings? So you have a location, or just let me know. I just want to make sure you can access that when you need to, but I think that's going to be really nice to have all of that lined out. So those are basically the things I had. Anything I forget?
a reminder, since we couldn't get the strategic planning committee together yesterday as we had hoped, we'll meet on Friday and kind of set any other details. But as we worked with FSG, getting a few things rolling, we'll get you a little more details about all of the other specific times, but they are going to be here in person, barring snowstorms, in March to be able to do that visioning session. I think the intention is they've lined out a pretty, obviously aggressive from a time frame, but there's specific deliverables that we have on that. We'll talk about those things with the committee and make sure that all lines up with your expectations. So.
I had I indicated I might have kind of a conflict. Do you have any idea how long that committee meeting is going to last tomorrow? Is it scheduled for a specific period of time?
I think we had looked at maybe just an hour, and we may be able to shorten our study committees a little bit. I don't know.
So an hour is about the estimated length for that?
I would guess so. We briefly talked, I'll just add a little bit. So I would think that probably an hour, given some of the decisions that had to be made of some upcoming planning, like working with the full board and those kinds of things, and the phone calls and the visioning. And then another piece that kind of is already pre-planned that'll just be updated and discussed briefly at our committee meeting will be that each of the board members before the March visioning session will get some additional background information just to refresh information about what we know about student achievement and elements within Nebraska already, so that each of you can kind of be refreshed as we lead into that visioning process with FSG in March. So we'll talk about a few of those things. So I don't think it'll be more than an hour, and ideally we will start, depending upon how the day goes, between 12, no later than 1 probably, that we'll start.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just might add also that actually Dr. Friesen is here in part because she was got snowed out of making a trip to Santee and Loup County this week, and our team was supposed to go up and work with priority schools in some of our initial steps there. So that's been important and actually somewhat energizing work as we continue to do that. Molly and I will actually go meet with the Loup County Board. Actually, Dr. Friesen is going to come along as well, meet with the Loup County Board next Wednesday. That's critical work ahead of us. Brian obviously has a lot of this work in front of you from a legislative standpoint, but I really appreciate our team, appreciate Donna, appreciate everyone's efforts on those fronts, and as they say, I couldn't do it without them, right? So thank you very much.
Okay, next we will move on to the next item, which is our special recognition. And we are very, very fortunate today to have Courtney Matulka, did I get it correctly? Who's our 2015 Nebraska Millikan Educator Award winner. And we really are thrilled that you're here today. So if you want to come forward, we have some information we're going to share, some updates, and get a chance to hear a little bit from you. I think I'll turn it over first to the commissioner who has some words, and I think a video that we're going to see.
I think we're going to do that, and then so it's really good to have Courtney here today. We were concerned the weather might somehow keep her away, but thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Courtney is an 8th grade science teacher at Beetle Middle School and Millard Public Schools. As she's the 2015 Millikan Award winner. We had an all-school assembly, and part of that, I didn't know if Patrick wanted to say something. I wasn't able to be there, unfortunately. Patrick was, I think, the only board member able to be there. And so
I was there, and I can't. I think you were really surprised, but it was amazing. I don't think they've had a full school convocation like that in a long time. That may be the second time or something. And as I watched those 600 and some kids walk in, I just kept thinking, where are they coming from? But I can't tell you what a great round of applause and how much recognition this young lady received when she received that award. And I mean the presenter came in from California, I believe, to specifically deliver that to you, along with that little check that you got. $2.50. No, I got my zeros wrong. $25,000, and as from what I understand, you're going to do some very nice and altruistic sort of things with that money, and I was terribly impressed with that, and I can't tell you how impressed I was with the ceremony and with the recipient. There's, you should be very proud of yourself, and so should your school.
Thank you, Pat.
Well, I think we have a little video presentation, if I'm correct, and so Brent, want to play that for us?
You've reached an age now where your maturity gets to kick in and you can start to make early decisions regarding who you want to be, where you want to go in life, and what careers interest you. We wish you every success.
Good teachers make the difference. And in the spirit of paying tribute to the importance of educators, I'd like to take a moment right now at this assembly to acknowledge the faculty at Beadle for the work that you do every day. Could all the teachers and all the staff please stand for a round of applause? This fall, we're traveling around the whole country presenting Milken Awards to outstanding educators.
The Milken Family Foundation Educator Award is Courtney Matulka. When I was reading a little bit about your teacher here, I was hearing about how she goes beyond just asking why, but getting students to ask what if, and teaching science in a way that is innovative and it really engages students. Science is more than just the formulas that you learn. Science is about how we solve problems.
This award isn't for me, it's for every teacher here at Beadle Middle School, because I come to work every day and I learn and grow from every single teacher I interact with. So thank you for stretching me, everyone. And all of you guys, we come here every day because we love you guys. You're the best part of our day, each and every day. We show up because we want to be with you, we want to hang out with you, we want to get to know you, and we want you to be successful adults in whatever career or path you choose to go down. So thank you for recognizing me, but I wish you could have recognized everyone in this building, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for each teacher and each student. So thank you.
My last year since having received the award has been a bit of a whirlwind. There's opportunities that seem to kind of pop up around every corner. I've gotten more involved in consulting and doing some curriculum leadership in AP World History. Had a chance to spend a week at the Lowell Milken Center for Unsung Heroes in Fort Scott, Kansas. And just the opportunity to network with great educators across the country has stretched my ideas about what I can do as a teacher.
I'm Courtney Matulka, and I teach 8th grade science at Beadle Middle School in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm a Milken educator.
Well, it's to be kind of my privilege to be able to present Courtney with this obelisk of recognizing her significant award, right? So thank you very much, Courtney. We'll get a picture together. Yeah, I was gonna point out the how's the little one doing?
Oh, he's good. He's good. A little boy. So, thank you so much. I cannot express my gratitude enough to the board and the Milken Foundation. This has been such a humbling experience for me. Thank you. I still can't process it watching the video, even when I was there. in person in October. It's like I can't wrap my mind around it. And today when I was driving down here in the serenity of my car, which having a little baby at home, quiet moments are not easy to come by. So I just drove here and I was trying to center myself. Like, what does this mean? What does education mean to me? And I kind of went down this journey for my 45-minute drive here and realized, education's a cornerstone in our nation. I mean, we've had public education for the last 200 years, and I thought about that as I drove here. I thought about how many things have changed due to the current times and due to technology, and so much has stayed the same. I mean, we still teach content in silos, and we still have teachers spending a majority of their lessons based on facts, just teaching facts and facts and facts. And I thought, well, where do we go from here? And first off, I have to say, anytime I've gone to a national conference, I'm so proud to say that I come from the state of Nebraska. I think we are doing so much right, but I want us to be the pinnacle. I want the state of Nebraska to be the state that every other state looks to, that we set the standard for what is good education. And I think what we need to do is harness the power of public education. I mean, this is the number one opportunity we have to reach every single future contributing citizen in our state is through our schools. And so our schools are so much more than the test scores that get published in the Omaha World Herald. It's really about our future. And so when I thought about, well, what does this all mean? I think one thing is we need to have policies that come to the forefront of our legislature that make us a world-class state when it comes to education and makes us globally competitive with all schools, not just here in Nebraska or in the country of the United States, but globally. And so one thing I thought about was, well, at least for me, I teach 8th graders, so I have 14-year-old students in my class, and they all have cell phones. And I think to myself, why do I spend so much of my lessons drilling facts into these kids, things that making them memorize all these things that are on these common assessments that I'm required to give, and then drilling facts into them so they memorize them, when at the end of the day they can pull out their cell phone and they can search any fact, any date, any person, and get an answer within seconds. So why am I spending so much time doing this with my kids when 2 years from now they don't need to have it memorized, they can just look it up? What they need to be able to do is think critically, and what they need to be able to do is take that knowledge I'm giving them and go in depth and apply it to real world situations. And as all of you know from the board, science is about to adopt, or not adopt, but we're looking at our state's standards again. We're about to start that cycle. And so this summer, I was looking at the next generation science standards. And I'm not saying they're the best ones out there, not at all, but they're doing so many things right. First off, if you looked at those standards, they have engineering in there, there's technology in there. Also, they have little sprinklings of mathematics and English. You can see the Common Core in there with the reading and the writing. And I think that's where we need to be headed. When we talk about standards and how we're going to teach curriculum in the future, it can't just be, oh, this is science class and this is English class and this is math class. They all need to be integrated together. So I really like how I see that in the NGSS standards. And I'm totally biased about science education, but I think science teachers are doing so much right when it comes to teaching science. And I don't mean that English teachers and math teachers need to start teaching like science teachers, but they need to start thinking with scientific principles of mind. Meaning, when you walk into a science classroom, teachers begin, a lot of science teachers begin their units by having kids post questions about the natural phenomenon in the world around them. Why is this happening? What's going on here? And I like to call that the ABC model, the activity before content. So you get students hooked into learning, you get them engaged, you get them motivated, because make them ask questions that are important to themselves, not to you, but to them. And then they go on this journey, right? It's an educational journey where they discover the answers throughout that entire unit. So we're not just throwing information at them, but rather we're discovering it together. And once you're at the end of the unit, I think that we need to get away from these multiple choice tests. These tests that are just allowing students to randomly bubble a correct answer where they can, oh, I think this is right or this is right. We need students to be defending their answers verbally in classroom discussions, in debates. And most importantly, I think we need to get kids writing about what they know, because you can't write what you don't know about. It's kind of difficult to fake that, but it's easy to randomly guess something and get it correct. So I'd like to see us get away from that, and most importantly, I'd like to see, and this happens in science because it's just a natural fit to our curriculum, but I think it's a natural fit for all curriculum if teachers look at their curriculum with a different lens, is modeling. I think we need to get kids modeling 2D models, 3D models, doing some kind of hands-on activities to show what they know in the classroom. And I think when we do that, students are no longer consumers of the curriculum that we're teaching, but they're creators. And we need to get our kids to be innovative. We need to start giving them real world problems, things that are actually plaguing our society, our nation, our entire world, and get them to take the information we're teaching them in class and actually apply it to the real world to try to solve some of those issues that are going on. Those are the things that they'll take with them, not some random fact that we drilled into them. But remember that one day when we were trying to solve the problem of clean water and how we can get clean water in all parts of the world. That's where I think education needs to be headed. And so as I drove here this morning and thought about what is education to me and where do I want to go, I thought, what can I do in my own room? And I feel like as a Milken Award recipient, that it's my duty every day to earn this award. And by doing that, I think I need to get to school every day and I need to think about how I can add inquiry, how can I continually change the way I assess my students, and how can I make sure my students are being innovative in everything that they do. And I asked the board, what can the board do to make sure that Nebraska will become the pinnacle for all states to model themselves after? And remember that in the struggle is always an opportunity to innovate, and that's what I think we need to be doing for the future of our education. So thank you for having me. I am very excited to be this next year to see what opportunities come with the Milken Award. So thank you.
Courtney. You know, on behalf of the board, I think we all congratulate you and are inspired by you, by your dedication, by what you bring to future generations. So thank you very much for what you do every day, and congratulations on this award.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break because I think all of us would like to also, take a minute to congratulate you as well. So we're going to take a short break. Hopefully you'll stay for a few minutes while we take a break. So
thank you.
10 minutes-ish.
We have had a good last couple months. And I'm just going to go through the highlights of these rules, starting with Rule 1. Rule 1 is our rule that governs the audits of public school districts. And basically what we're doing in this, the changes or modifications on this rule that we're asking you to approve tomorrow is to update the guidance in there according to the new single audit guidance that basically increases the threshold of requiring single audits for school districts across the state from 500,000 to 750,000. So again, it's a federal change. We're just trying to get our rule in line with the new federal guidance. The other change in this rule is basically requires school districts reporting on a basis of accounting other than cash to include in their financial statements supplemental schedules of cash receipts, disbursements, and fund balances. And those schedules must be reported on an audited information. So those are the two changes to rule number 1.
Any questions about the changes to rule number 1? Go ahead and continue, Bryce.
All right, we're on to rule 2. Rule 2 is our coding structure, and rule 2 is our uniform system of accounting rule. Basically, we go over coding structures and funds in this rule. Basically, what we're proposing in the changes to rule 2 is to first add a student fee fund into this rule. Basically, it's already in statute. It's already being used across the state. For some reason, it's not in the rule. So we're just trying to make sure the rule matches up with how everything else is working. Second, we're changing the name of the school lunch fund. One of the funds that schools have to use for their accounting purposes to the school nutrition fund. Basically, it's a reflection of now schools. It's not just a lunch fund, it's a nutrition fund. They have breakfast programs and other programs that are all flowing through that. So just a more accurate representation of what it actually is.
Any questions on the changes, proposed changes to Rule 2? Bryce?
All right,
Continue on. You're on a roll.
Yeah, we'll keep going. Rule 83. This is our reorganization rule, so school district reorganizations. We have 2 changes to this rule. First, we are eliminating the assimilation process, which was repealed in statute in 2006, so something that needed to be done for some time. Second, we are adding rules for Class 2 and Class 3 districts, which maintain the only high school in the county and have membership in grades 9 through 12 less than 25 students. These changes are being made to conform with State Statute 79-499, which changed during the 2015 legislative session when LB 477 was passed to add exceptions for districts with the only high school in the county. Basically, again, just changing the rule to conform with statute that was changed last session.
And that Rule 83 was actually our item number 5. Any questions or comments on
sorry.
those? That's all right.
Got ahead.
Proposed changes to Rule 83? If not, let's move on with Rule 12.
Okay, Rule
Which is item
12.
3.
Yep, I'm sorry,
That's
I
okay.
got out of order
Thanks.
there. Rule 12, we are repealing, and basically it is being joined with Rule 13, which we're going to talk about in a second, all those changes, but the only difference between Rule 12 and Rule 13 is when you're filing for exempts, there's our exempt status rules, or exempt school rules. One is for religious, if you're filing for religious purposes, and one is for non-religious purposes. And if you're filing for non-religious purposes, you're required to receive the immunizations as required. So we're going to be combining those together.
So are there any questions about the repeal of Rule 12? If not, we'll move right into Rule 13, and if there's questions between 12 and 13, we can have that discussion as well. So, Bryce,
Okay.
if you want to continue on with item 4.
All right, Rule 13, this is where we have several changes, and these changes come about as part of a quite long process that was a lot of work for our department, but also collaboration with NCHEA and HEN as well, and other stakeholders that are involved at the exempt schools. So it's kind of a collaborative effort, and I guess this is the second time we're bringing these rules. It was done a couple years ago as well, and it was not taken forward from there. So I guess with much work, the changes that we're proposing to be adopted tomorrow, first again, we're combining Rule 12 into 13. We're also adding the word legal before the word guardian throughout, just to make it consistent with the statutes. We're adding the definition of the initial year of operation to clarify for first-year filers. We're also defining what residence and resident means in the rule. We're adding the word promptly, which is being used to clarify the time for parents to file forms for the first time with NDE. We're changing the filing date for new filers to July 15th annually, with provisions for families who move into the state after that date or who wish to transfer their children from an approved or accredited school to an exempt school mid-school year. We're streamlining the parent representative Form B and also eliminating redundancies on that form. And for the first year of operation, we're providing for an additional 30 days to file the information summary. If needed, and other changes to Section 004 to clarify deadlines and streamline information to be reported. We're moving Sections 11 and 12 and Section 13 under the general information section of the rule. And the requirements for forms being sworn under oath before notary public are being eliminated throughout the rule where statute permits, so as to reduce the burden on parents, as well as revising the appendices in A, B, C, and D to be more user-friendly. And then there's a few other small non-substantive changes, so.
Comments?
I know it's
Pat.
been.
Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead. No.
Pat and then Glenn or Glenn.
I was going to say, I know it's been a long, hard road, but I think everybody's happy with the way the rule turned out, and thanks for you guys going through that process with the homeschool community.
No problem. It was a long process, but I think the end outcome was a good one, so.
I guess I was just kind of going to reiterate what Glenn said. It sounds like you did a good job working with the stakeholders in this, and I've not heard anything negative at all. So I'm presuming they're all very supportive of the changes, from what I've heard.
It was a team effort, and I should thank Beth Bolte, Mickey Iverson, Brian Halstead, and Scott Summers as well. It was a team effort for the department, and those guys put in a lot of work to make it turn out and get the support that we were hoping for. So.
Well, I basically just want to re-echo what the gentleman, both of them, said. But I like the fact that you obviously worked so well together with the other constituents that you had no opposing comments when it came to the hearing. I think that's very, very positive for all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce, again, job well done. So thank you for being so thorough, and thank you. I think I echo my colleagues' sentiments on really pulling Rule 12 and 13 together in a way that was, I think, a win-win for everybody. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item 6, and that's discuss approval of Rule 24. Sharon Cott and Pat Madsen. Welcome.
Good afternoon. We're glad we could bring out the sunshine. Tomorrow you will be asked, I'm Sharon Cott, Senior Administrator for Adult Program Services, and of course with me is Pat Madsen, Program Specialist for Educator Preparation in Adult Program Services. Tomorrow you will be asked to take 2 separate actions. One will be to approve the Rule 24, to go forward to the Governor and Secretary of State for formal approval. And the second action you will be asked to take is to approve the guidelines which accompany Rule 24. The guidelines stop with state board action. They do not go over for Governor and Secretary of State approval. So that is why you see the split in those two, although they are very much companionate documents, and why we do want them kind of approved at the same time, because each of them inform one another. By way of very quick reminder, Rule 24 is developed through the constituency work of the Nebraska Council on Teacher Education by groups that we call ad hocs. The ad hocs are typically drawn from representative groups, north, south, east, west, large, small administrators, teachers, practitioners, to come together to look at what is currently in the rule about preparing teachers in a specific endorsement area, to reflect on any kind of national organizational standards that might be informing current practice, to reflect on Nebraska state standards and their implications for the preparation of teachers in that endorsement area, as well as other information that may be important to the preparation of Nebraska teachers. What you see before you is the work that came out of this past year, and those specific endorsements are listed there in the support materials for you. we dealt with arts, health sciences, education, middle level education, music, and vocal music, along with a couple of endorsements recommended for elimination because of their viability and need. And those also are in the art area and the music area. The other changes that are there are, I would call kind of cosmetic in nature, trying to keep everything as uniform and consistent and understandable as we can possibly make it, given, after all, it is a rule. So, I would point out to you that of particular interest, I think, in the endorsement revisions are the health sciences education. We've had health occupations on the books forever and ever. There were no institutions offering that endorsement since way back when. But as we see that increasing demand for individuals who are prepared to work in the health sciences area, so then becomes a need for having teachers who are qualified and prepared for working with students as they transition along a pathway for careers in the health sciences. So this was a refresh of that old endorsement in hopes that we begin to have a pool of high school teachers who are prepared to support students in that occupational vision for themselves. And then secondly, I would point out that the middle level education used to be called middle grades education. Won't take a lot of time here, but what is important, I think, to communicate is that the ad hoc committee spent a great deal of time with this one. The result, very generally, is that we have strengthened the content preparation, particularly the academic content preparation of a middle grades teacher. And we have also gotten a bit more intentional about the pedagogical skills that one would expect for an individual who works with that group that we call middle-level kids. It is not necessarily just a kind of a high-level elementary or a low-level secondary. There is, and there's a national a body of knowledge around middle-level students. And we have tried to be more clear about what that is, making that the basis of the program rather than kind of begging and borrowing from the levels and kind of smashing it in the middle. So, Pat, have I missed any other substantive changes that we might want to? Okay, so with that then, what are your questions about Rule 24?
Maureen and then Glenn.
Okay. Can you explain better to me why you eliminated general art and instrumental music?
I'm going to take that.
If you want.
As far as instrumental music, it was the opinion of those on the ad hoc committee that we really only need a field endorsement in music because that's what most other states have gone to. And many of our candidates are prepared here in Nebraska, but unfortunately they do go to other states. So many institutions have dropped everything but the music field endorsement. And when we started looking at the differences, there was only a difference of from 4 to 6 hours in instrumental music as compared to a music field. So it was really the recommendation of the committee not to have any subject endorsements. We did keep vocal music because there were more candidates prepared in vocal music, and we thought maybe that would help. Some schools have a music teacher if the candidate chose to just do vocal music. So that was the main reason for that. And general art has been an elementary endorsement, and we were expecting the same preparation as the art field endorsement, but in fewer hours. We also have had no completers in general art for several years. So.
Thank you.
I I had the same question as Maureen. I thought this was the day the music died.
No, not at all, not at all.
Fine arts.
But I did wonder on the guidelines, Appendix C, page 389, I still found instrumental music and general art in that appendix.
Okay, and currently, we do have candidates in those programs, and so until those candidates complete those programs, that will probably stay in. So I would expect that in the next year or two, those would be taken out. Okay.
And that is maybe an important thing for you all to understand, is
Right.
that if we waited till no one had these so we could just implement changes, we'd wait forever.
Right.
And so we've tried to be very careful about not punishing teachers, not negatively impacting teachers or schools who are currently out there and who were prepared under the expectations of the time, but to figure out how to transition them in a logical, least disruptive way. I would also make a point on the get to it here, the instrumental music. That conversation was heavily, or decision was heavily influenced by our administrative constituency on the group. They were very helpful in helping us understand what direction Nebraska schools see themselves going in that area.
Any other questions? So I just want to clarify, and then I'll go to Glenn. There is no intent to let the music die. That music is an important part of the curriculum yet. Okay.
But I still plan to drive my Chevy to the levee.
All right,
We could go on quite a ways with this, couldn't we?
Glenn, would you like to now
I'm
add
just
even
going
more?
to pick on Appendix C again because it does refer to page numbers, I believe. Oh, passing score, I'm sorry. So
We can't stop it.
they're going to do it. They're going to do it. All right.
We good?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
the passing score.
Any other questions? All right. If not, then thank you very
Thank you.
much. We will move on to item 7. And there's Melody. Discuss negotiating and entering into a contract up to $50,280 for the Environmental Rating Scales Institute. Welcome, Melody.
Good afternoon. I am Melody Hobson. I'm the administrator of the Office of Early Childhood here at NDE. And tomorrow you will be asked to grant the commissioner the authority to negotiate entering into that contract. And very briefly, that the contract is with the ERSI, which they are the sole. They're the sole entity that provides this training. This is the training that we use for the support, the reliability of our observers who go into school districts and child care programs for either Results Matter or Step Up to Quality. And we think that it is our responsibility to have the highest trained, the most skilled observers, so that we have good confidence that we are interpreting the scale correctly and that we are interpreting the scale consistently the same way across all observers. So this is part of keeping that reliability intact, is asking the authors and the people who work with the authors to come to Nebraska to train a core group that we have identified who are our anchors in Nebraska, and so that we get kind of the information from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Melody, as a member of your early childhood, since Pat's not here today, I just wanted to reflect from our committee's viewpoint. There's a lot of misconceptions about quality assessments in environmental rating. And so, excuse me, so having it consistent and reliable will really demonstrate that you're there to support parents, not to find fault and find reasons to make them feel inferior.
And these are specifically for classrooms. What we do is, this is what was considered process quality. Looking at how much time the children are in play, how much time the children what kind of materials that they have access to. You know, it doesn't do any good if you have all the toys in the world if they can only play with three things at a time. You know, how the classroom interacts, how does the staff greet each child when they come in? You know, what does mealtime look like? Is it, you know, are the kids expected to sit in chairs where their feet dangle and they can't reach the table, and then expected to eat well? You know, what's the language? What we know so much about now about the language that people use with young children, that it's not enough just to be nice. You have to be expanding their vocabulary. You have to be providing language models for them, and this is one of the things that these environment rating scales look for. It also looks for basic health and sanitation things, and I will tell you from vast experience that children are not clean, and you know, you would not believe the kind of conversations that go on in the boys' bathroom. But you know, teaching children to wash their hands, that is the cheapest, best way to keep young children in school, is because if they're sick, they can't be there, and if they're not washing their hands, they're more likely to be sick, and you're never going to get necessarily ahead of it, but you just have to make sure that they do the best that they can. So there are things like that, as well as, you know, hazards and chemicals and things like that. But so that's, you know, it's not something that you can walk in and do a checklist for. You have to really observe. And with any observational assessment, whether it's a child assessment or a program assessment, the key is you have to have people who understand the scale, interpret the scale the same way and correctly, and then rate it appropriately. So we're trying to get the most skilled, knowledgeable people doing the job. John?
No, just a quick question. The funding for this, is this by chance grant or flow through?
This is actually, this is state funds, actually, because these will go into both the Step Up to Quality program and a state grant funded or school district programs. So either the state allotment that we have for technical assistance and Step Up to Quality funds with our general funds.
Any other questions? Thank you, Melody. If you want to continue on to the next item.
The next one is a contract that would be for a public engagement campaign for Step Up to Quality. You know, we've been doing Step Up to Quality now for about a year and a half. We get new programs in about every week. We have more than 1,000 people in our professional record system now. It's growing, but we have the processes in place. Now it's time to get the public engaged in this. It's important that programs understand what's out there, and we've been able to do some, but it's important that we have a more cohesive engagement strategy. And it's also important that we have an engagement strategy with families and communities. It's important that business know what, you know, high quality early childhood looks like, and that we have this available for programs. It's important that families understand the importance of high quality programs. And, you know, our goal is really so that families will be asking, are you a part of Step Up to Quality? You know, what is your rating when it becomes public? So we did an RFP last fall, and we got a couple of applicants. We were not as they were fine applications, but they didn't do really what we were hoping that they would do. We kind of tweaked the RFP process a little bit and kind of what we were trying to be more clear on what we were asking. We got a good group of applications this winter. We had a group of people from both internally and externally who were looking at them. And MSpace was the group that we found to be most, I think, most attuned to the vision that we have. So they are out of Omaha, and it is to be divided up $100,000 for the first year of the public engagement campaign, $50,000 essentially for the second year. Do it in several stages so that we get the most bang for our buck. they're also going to be helping us with, I mean, we already have a website, we have, a Facebook page, but they can help us make the most of what we already have, not recreate something that we've got already.
Are there any questions? Molly?
Melody, I don't know if you were listening when we were doing our legislative retreat, but it pertains to both these, the child care that's in the home and center-based programs. And I think it was Glenn mentioned he was concerned about closings of some of those centers. But what I like about this public education is it really will encourage people in child care, daycare, or child care centers to take advantage of, to step up to quality. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what M-Space is going to do in so far as promotion, and please keep the board members informed.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Because if they're in your community or mine, it'd be nice to go hear them talk.
Yeah, we also want to make sure that the resources are getting to the programs who need them and want them. This, Step Up to Quality is a voluntary program, but we think it speaks very, very highly of programs that want to, most of the programs in Step Up to Quality are not there because they are at that $250,000 level of HHS reimbursement. They're there because they want to show the world that they're doing a good job and they want to improve in what they're doing. And we think that needs to be, we think people need to know that. We think people need to realize that, child care providers, most of them think of themselves as professionals, and there are things that are common to high quality programs, and we want them to be able to show it off.
Pat?
Of the 4 proposals that you did receive, what was the range in costs?
The range in cost they were all about $150,000. We were trying to figure out how much bang we could get for that. So we weren't trying to say, okay, here you have, just tell us what you can do with any amount. We set the cap at $150,000.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Melody. Next, we'll move on to item 9, discuss approval of the VR portion of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Mark?
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Schultz with Nebraska VR, and I'll let Vicki introduce herself. And we kind of decided
we're going to do 9
moment
and 10.
to combine them, even though they're separate agenda items.
Okay.
I'm going to review the plan process because it's a little different than we've been in the past in regards to approval for a state plan. And it was more of a collaborative process in regards to what's required by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. And so that was passed in 2014, but we're just now coming into the requirements of a planning process. So the act requires that core programs, and those are programs within the Department of Education, Adult Education and Literacy and VR, collaborate and align our programs with those in the Department of Labor, so adult dislocated workers and youth programs, as well as Wagner-Pizer programs. So we had to work together to develop a unified vision for how we're going to align our programs, but at the same time try to preserve the integrity of our programs. So it's kind of a balancing act as we move through this process. So the state is required to submit a plan by April 1st of this year. And it's the first time we've had to do this in terms of either a unified or a combined state plan, and the difference between those is a unified state plan is just among the core partners, those 4 programs that I mentioned. A combined state plan allows the state to opt in some other programs that are workforce oriented. So in Nebraska, you have TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. You've got the workforce segment of SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and unemployment insurance and veterans and others that have agreed to opt into this plan. I think Career Ed is also looking to opt in at a point that becomes convenient for them. So looking at how we align our programs to provide more efficient services, more effective services for businesses as well as individuals who are looking for work. So that's the premise behind this, and Congress said you're going to do this and you're going to do it through this state plan process. In addition to that, each program then has an individual section to complete other than this alignment and the common goals and vision for the workforce delivery system. We have requirements that we have to follow within our programs. So what you see before you, or what we submitted, this was the VR portion of the state plan. The whole plan itself is about 400 and some pages. So you can see with the combination of all those, it becomes a little bit cumbersome. But the goals for us, I just thought what I would share with you are just a couple of the unique things that we're doing that are a part of those goals. We really did work to align our goals with that of the entire workforce system. But some in particular that are new to us will be those around what's called pre-employment transition services. And that's a directive by Congress to set aside some of our funding to reach out to students 16 to 21 who have an IEP or a 504 plan, and to start working with them early and to get them engaged in that career readiness process, and then to hopefully bring them into VR and help them move from school to work sooner. So we are going to be doing that. There are a number of things that we're going to have to develop in collaboration with schools, who also have a similar responsibility, as well as some other entities such as Department of Labor. And how we move individuals or students through those programs is going to be something we have to focus on over the next couple of years. So we have some planning in place to develop a better coordinated system, helping both the students and the families as they plan and prepare for that school to work transition. So we think that's kind of an exciting thing. We're also going to be doing some of the things that we've done in the past, hopefully expanding on those. So the Project Search initiative that you've heard us talk about in the past, we're going to try to do more of those, working closer with businesses and schools to develop those on-the-job training programs. We are continuing our career pathways advancement program. So looking at those clients we've placed in the past, contacting them and supporting their advancement within those job areas, those careers. So looking to support them going back to school, training, and then being eligible for middle skill level positions and advancing their careers within those businesses. So all those things are incorporated in our goals, and I'd be glad to answer any questions about those if you'd like. So.
Actually, why don't we do this? If you want to also go on and talk about the component in adult ed and literacy, then we can just have a conversation about any of the elements tied to WIOA.
That'd be great.
Okay.
So,
I'm Vicki Bauer. Vicki Bauer with the Adult Education Program, and as Mark said, we've been meeting a lot since last February, every other Friday at a minimum. So we've come to know our partners quite well. And I think one thing that we're really striving for is to have seamless service to our clients or students, or however we identify the people that we serve, because some of the people are shuffled around sometimes, and we really feel that that's very important, that we do have that seamless service to our common clients. We are, Title II is adult education, and we are a required partner. We do provide the foundation or basic skills instruction to those persons who are 16 years of age and older, withdrawn from school, and who function at or below the 12th grade level. One of the main, or the main focus for WIOA adult education is to assist our adults to become economically self-sustaining and to be good citizens within their communities and states. One thing that I should say, has been lacking in adult education and is now come to the forefront in the last few years is that we need to provide career pathways and college and career readiness to our adult education students. Just getting the GED or learning English is not sufficient for them to go out and be able to get a good job and advance in their job, or to go on to post-secondary education. So that's really an exciting part of WIOA for us. Also, major things that will be going on is that we are adopting the Nebraska's K-12 college and career readiness standards. And so through a multi-year project, we will be aligning our current curriculum and the creation of new curriculum for our adult ed programs across the state. We also will be incorporating work readiness, skills, and digital literacy for our programs. And digital literacy sometimes will include our staff as well as our students. So we've got a lot of training to do in that area as well. There is a part of WIOA that allows us to increase the amount of money that goes towards corrections education from 10 to 20%, but they didn't give us any extra money to increase that from 10 to 20%. So if we do increase aid to corrections, then that would come out of the amount of money that we do grant to the local public programs. So that kind of is a catch-22 for us. Now I can't read my, okay. Another component is integrated education and training. And what that is for our ESL learners. While they're learning English, they need to be in some sort co-enrolled in a training program that's provided either by the other partners or from other entities such as business. We don't have the final guidance on that yet, and that's not going to come for a little while. So as soon as we have the final guidance on that, we'll be able to make better plans in that area. That's about all I have in a nutshell. Ours, if you notice, we didn't have as many pages as Mark, so we didn't have as much writing to do.
Are there questions? Molly?
Oh, Vicki and Mark, I just want to say, we have only like 4% unemployment, or it's down to 3 in Nebraska now. But I think that there are some valuable human resources that have been lost in that little period between 1821 and some of our kids in corrections. So I just want to say thank you for taking this opportunity to find help for those kids and then young adults, because if they aren't employable, it's a sad situation. So thank you so much. What you're doing is very important.
I would like to add something to that. Even though we have low unemployment in the state, that took away around 1,000 students in adult education last year, because our students would be seeing signs that says $15 an hour, no high school diploma needed. So that was more than they have made ever, and so they've dropped out of adult ed to go and work at $15 an hour, and our question is what's going to happen when that job goes away? You know, that's a real concern for us.
Yeah, and I can add my perspective to that, because what we see is it's fairly easy for people to get a job right now. People are hiring, but they come to us, or they should come to us, because they're having issues keeping the job. And it's usually due to some behavioral issues or disability-related issues that they haven't resolved. And so we can provide the supports for both the employer as well as the individual to help keep the job, which is a reason they should come to us. So we've got a different issue. Even though there's some advantages to having that low unemployment rate, it creates some other problems as well.
Any other comment, Lily?
Not only is it a false enticement when they say $15 an hour, but it's probably not a full-time job with benefits anyway. And that is one thing that if somehow you can say, okay, do get the job, but also maintain this instruction process as well, and stress the point, long-term, big picture, what are the benefits? And that is my big concern, the way businesses do operate today. It's kind of what I call false enticements.
Maureen?
As I was reading this the other day, it struck me about the folks currently employed in the personnel category and what the current vacancies are right now versus the concern in 5 years. Do you see being able to replace the personnel?
Yeah.
Is it a concern? Because as I read through everything, it appeared to be a concern initially, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, retention of staff has been an issue for us long-term. And so we have done some things recently to try to alleviate that, or at least hopefully remedy some of the staff who were leaving because we weren't paying an adequate salary. We had a number of staff who held part-time jobs because they couldn't afford to live off the salary that we were paying. So I appreciate the commissioner's support in helping me to assist those individuals getting their salaries up to what I hope will be a wage that they can survive and focus on their current jobs and that job only. I think that will make them better staff. So we are doing some things there. We are looking at those individuals who are retiring and making sure that we have succession plans in place. particularly for some of those critical positions that deal more with planning and where that institutional memory is so critical to success. So.
And I just would like to echo some of the comments and thank you. Having kind of been around the workforce investment process as an act from way back to where it's at today with, I think, the direction that's moving in the collaborative nature that's really happening. I think that's a win-win for Nebraskans. So I think really the joint planning that's being done is really beneficial for all Nebraskans, including those with disabilities and those certainly with some academic and educational gaps. So.
Yeah, if I could just say we're really excited about the partnerships that have been created with the Department of Labor, where in the past you really haven't done a good job collaborating, just to be honest about it. And I think having those discussions, the dialogue, as Vicki said, every other week we get together, creating those relationships has really opened up some doors and opportunities for us. And recently, just last week, right after the snow hit out in D.C., Vicki and I had the pleasure of being out there and trudging through the snow up to the hotel to a conference. And one of the attendees from Nebraska happened to be the deputy director for the Department of Economic Development. And that opened up some additional doors in terms of recruiting businesses and the services that we provide as an incentive for businesses coming to Nebraska. So we had some really interesting conversations. So I do appreciate the legislation and kind of the opportunities that it has created. I think we're taking advantage of those.
That's great. All right, thank you very much. We will now move on to item 11, and that's discuss approval of the contract with ESU 9 for 2016-17.
And actually, Dean is out. We're trying to get Diane Steamer. We believe she has some information on this particular contract as well. So I can give you a little bit of update. A lot of the data training and other things has been a long-standing relationship with ESU 9 to make sure they coordinated the facilities and some of the professional development activities around our data training. And so I know this one's been a long-standing such contract in that work. I don't know exactly if the outline of particular trainings, it's not on here, so I don't have that. So we might have to get that information for you tomorrow if Diane doesn't come. But otherwise, it's been her routine. So we'll see where Diane's at.
Yeah, if not, then we can either come back to it or address it tomorrow. So let's move on to our committee reports and other items for discussion. I know we've got a lot of committee reports to do. So Commissioner, we'll start with you and just any general overview, AQuest.
Yeah, and again, thank you for your time and efforts on the AQuest tenants and the direction that we've been going. Thanks to the staff that have been working on this. As we continue to press forward, as I mentioned before, we have certain decision points, certain policy work that we will be doing around AQuest, certain kind of almost inventories of the support systems that we anticipate, plus the updates to the policy, the classification system overall. And so as we continue that work, we can continue to learn from that, but it's really important that now our committee work starts to structure around those next steps and those next phases in our vision. And so it's really, I mean, I hope someone writes about this someday. It's actually quite, I think, honestly, quite impressive when we've had this environment of quite a bit of uncertainty, and I'm feeling like the certainty is coming through, so we can really begin to focus on the improvement of the system as a whole too. So that's really what I have as a kind of an overview thought.
Okay, well, we will move. Are we moving back?
Do you want to hear more about ESU 9 because Matt Hastings is here?
Why not? Yeah. He's here. Yeah. We'll drop back to item 11, discuss approval of the contract with ESU 9. Welcome.
Hello,
Matt.
I'm sorry about that. We have the Dean was gone today, so a little mix-up here. So we are going to come to you to ask for approval for a contract that we have traditionally with ESU 9 to help us in coordinating for training for NSSRS. ESU 9 provides all of the administrative efforts around identifying room space available across the ESUs and helping us to coordinate professional development. So for $50,000.
Are there any questions? All right, Matt, thanks for
Sorry about that.
thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Matt was not even supposed to be here because he had a flight canceled, so he's still here. So
We're glad you were able to join us. Next, we'll move on to the domain report outs, and there may be some report outs that are relative to each tenant as well. And so what we'll do is turn it over to the domain for any general report outs, and then if there's any tenant report outs within each domain, we'll go through that process. So we'll start with teaching and learning, and Maureen, I don't know if you and or Ryan are going to
ask Ryan to come up. Isn't that what chairs of committees do? They're able to
Yes.
delegate out?
It's your call.
That's what I learned in leadership classes.
I'm Ryan Four. I'm the Deputy State Director for Nebraska Career Education. I serve on the Teaching and Learning team, which was the Curriculum and Instruction team last month. And we went through a pretty lengthy process through the renaming of that, and pretty intentional around that naming with the work of what we do. And I'm here for Corey Epler in one sense as the senior administrator of that team. I'm working with Maureen on the teaching and learning domain, and so that includes college and career ready tenet, assessment tenet, and educator effectiveness tenet. And two big pieces came forward out of that tenet meeting today in terms of what are those action items that are coming up in the future. And one of those is around assessment and thinking about a revisioning of assessment, statewide assessment and other assessments, as well as standards processes, and specifically upcoming is the science content standards. And so those are the two major topics that came out of that meeting that we'll continue work on in that domain meeting over the next month. Relative to content standards, there was a need for some clarification from last month's meeting about the timeline of standards and the writing and revision of content standards that we provide through the Department of Education. And so Corey developed the document that's in front of you to further clarify that standards revision process. And so you'll note that there's some front material about the state statute around 4 content areas. And know that we've been writing standards and providing frameworks for schools in all of the 18 areas on the inside of this page for many years. At some points, under different leadership, they might have been called essential learnings or had different names. And within the last few years, those have very intentionally been called standards. And again, those are guidelines and frameworks for local schools to determine their own curriculum. And so you'll notice on the inside there provides some detail about what that standards revision and review process looks like for each of those. You'll notice that because of a change in state statute, we've moved from a 5-year to a 7-year process in those top 2 tiers. The career education content areas are still on a 5-year process, and that decision was made based on the nature of the business and industry input in those and the changing nature of the end goal or the careers that are available to students in those areas and how that is ever changing. So that's the need for the difference there. What questions are there about the teaching and learning domain or about the state standards process?
Glenn, is there anything you want to add relative to the college and career readiness?
Well, I know one of the things we're looking at starting real soon is the physical education standards are going to be fast-tracked, trying to get that ready to go by September of this year. And then we start on the science standards in the fall. So
Well, and for the domain, we will have the tenant assessment reporting out yet. So maybe what we'll do is move to assessment and then determine if there's any final wrap-up from the teaching and learning domain, if that sounds all right. So with that, we'll have Valerie and Jeremy come forward. And Ryan did give kind of the teaser on assessment, but we felt it was important to have a little more of an update on assessment from the assessment tenant. And it is my pleasure to have Valerie provide the update of the good news and kind of an exciting direction and the opportunities that are here, which will also be mixed with a little bit of not so good news. But sometimes you look at not so good news and you take opportunities from the not so good news. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie, who's going to lead us through some next steps with assessment.
Okay. And I have with me as Jeremy Henniger, who is the Assistant Director of Assessment. So first of all, I think we want to start with a YouTube video of John King, the Acting Secretary of Education. And I think Brent is ready with that video for us.
Hey everybody, I'm John King, the Acting Secretary of Education. And today I want to talk about a subject that I know is on the minds of a lot of parents, students, and teachers: testing. Over the past 7 years, states around the country have raised their standards so that students are learning the critical thinking and problem-solving skills they'll need to succeed in life. And part of successfully teaching students those vital skills is assessing their progress, to know which students are on track and how to support those who aren't. But as with most things, good assessment is about balance. I've seen that as both a teacher and a principal. As a teacher, you know that information on your students' progress is crucial to tailoring instruction to their specific needs and to understanding whether a lesson has worked. As a school leader, you need tools to ensure that every student is learning and to support the growth of your staff. And yet in both roles, you're also always seeking more opportunities for quality instructional time for your students. Good assessments can actually be part of great learning experiences, but simplistic or poorly constructed tests just take away from critical learning time without providing useful information. Despite good intentions, there are too many places around the country where the balance still isn't quite right. At too many schools, there are unnecessary tests without a clear purpose, and tests that just aren't the quality that our students and educators deserve. That's why today, we are issuing guidance to states and districts about which federal dollars may be used to help reduce unnecessary assessments and to improve the quality of assessments. This guidance builds off the President's announcement on testing in October and the principles we put out at that time, which outline that assessments must be worth taking and of high quality, enhance teaching and learning, and give an all-around picture of how students and schools are doing in a timely manner. The good news is that many states and districts, including Delaware, where I just visited, are working to decrease testing burden on students and teachers while ensuring that assessments move beyond bubble tests to measure vital skills like writing, problem solving, and critical thinking. We need this to happen in all states and communities. Working together, I know we can strike the balance that every teacher and principal seeks and that every student deserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do you want me to
Did you
continue?
want to?
Okay. So first of all, I will start. We had 1 hour to have our assessment tenant meeting this morning, and I just would like to thank the committee members who really provided excellent leadership in a very short time. Rachel is correct. I am here to offer, Jeremy and I are both here to offer some information about the past 2 weeks that has been rather disturbing, but also to talk about the positive effect of that. So we at NDE find ourselves at really a confluence of events that are providing us with an opportunity for the department, the State Board of Education, working in partnership with our Nebraska districts, to take our vision of assessment perhaps in a new direction. A number of events have created this opportunity. One is the vision of AQuest, which focuses on effective educational practices across 6 tenets, including assessment. The second one is the U.S. Department's Education Every Student Succeeds Act passage, the ESSA, which is intended to be less regulatory and less intrusive for states. And certainly, as we saw in this presentation, there's an acknowledgement on the part at the federal level that more assessment is not effective assessment and does not improve student learning. We've also had Nebraska state legislation introduced over the last 2 years, LB 101 last year, LB 930 this year, and LB 1066, all which open the door within state statute to allow some changes for a new vision of assessment. Then we have also had some technology issues that have occurred over the last 2 weeks with our NISA writing test as provided by Data Recognition Corporation. I've provided a summary of the 3 major events that have taken place in writing to you. And I'm going to just try to encapsulate briefly what took place here in our school districts so that you have an understanding of it and answer any questions you have. 3 major issues happened. On January 21st, Insight, which is our test engine for providing the NISA writing test, was unavailable for 1 hour and 47 minutes in a partial area of our state. It was not statewide, it was partial. The reason for this was a conflict. It was a software bug in one of the network devices of a third-party network vendor provided to DRC. Approximately 325 students from 18 schools across 6 districts who started their testing that day completed that on another day or were locked at that time. So there is we can't always pinpoint exactly how many students were affected, but this is a pretty good estimate of how many were by looking at our test telemetry. No student work was lost when this event took place. The second event that took place was actually statewide. It took place on mid-morning on January 27th, and Insight was unavailable. Students could not get into tests, and the students that were in testing were kicked out of their tests, and it lasted for 32 minutes. The cause of it was that the server at DRC that was storing the writing results from the state of Nebraska began to fill. There's an emergency alert. There wasn't enough time for them to react to that emergency alert to provide more storage space. So until they were able to provide more storage space, the system went down because it doesn't want student assessments not stored because there's a 15-second heartbeat. Every 15-second assessments are transmitted. And so the system went down for the 32 minutes. We know that there were, that DRC can see that there were 1,488 students that started testing before 11:39, and they either completed testing or remained in progress after the service was restored. They came from 85 districts and 112 schools. Again, we don't know how many students tried to log in during that time. No student work was lost. The very next day, on Thursday morning, January 28th, testing was affected for 4 hours and 7 minutes. It did not go down. It is not that Insight was unavailable. In fact, students were able to log in. And as it is also a very busy testing date, there were a high number of students in there. But what happened is that the online dictionary and the spell checker were not available to those students during that time. Our schools are allowed to provide hard copy dictionaries to our students, and many of them do, but there are also many schools who rely on the online dictionary for their students. And so that was not available to them. In addition, there were 250 students who should have had the accommodation to have the spell checker operational, and they did not have that available to them during that time. So that was fixed by the afternoon. As I said, it was a 4 hour and 7 minute effect throughout our state. No student work was lost, but what I will say in all 3 of these events is that, and our districts have been very clear about this, there is an effect on students, and it's very difficult for us to measure. Are those, well, first of all, we can very clearly say that the over 300 students that didn't have spell checker were affected. Most assuredly, many of the students who couldn't access a dictionary may have been affected. But there's also an effect just on the students and them being able to do their best work, to be able to take that test in an environment that assures them that everything's going smoothly and nothing's being lost, and it allows them to do their very best efforts. And so for that reason, we also realize there is an effect in our state. So those are the issues that took place, and I will answer any questions that you want to ask me about those, if I can, and if not, find the answers. Glenn. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, what is the time period for the writing test?
It started on January 17th, that Monday. 18th was that Monday, and it goes through this Friday. But I am glad you asked that, Glenn, and that would be February 5th. We asked for a 3-day extension. February 5th, sorry, I had to check that. We asked for a 3-day extension, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week. All the testing will continue through Wednesday of next week. 2 reasons. Not only did we have actually some students that they're still trying to finish up from this, but in addition, there has been some snow in the state of Nebraska, and it has prevented testing. And in particular, the last week of testing this week is for makeup tests. And so schools were not able to, there were a couple of things they had trouble doing, even like figuring out who are students that are left that need to be tested, because we have some unfinished tests in the system. And second of all, making sure they rounded up those kids and got them in and got them tested when no students were in school. Right.
John? Oh, and then
Last time we spoke with DRC, they said there wouldn't be any hiccups like this again. I do remember that, and that's why we gave them the contract.
That's right.
Because they gave us the word.
You're right. So would you like me to?
What kind of mitigation are we going to proceed forward with?
I think it's a very, very good question. Go ahead.
Yeah,
No,
if you want to,
I think
that's
it's a
fine.
very good question. And so first of all, you were right. We had assurances from the company. And all of you, we, the commissioner, and our districts took those at good faith, that they would do that. And that did in fact happen last year. It did not happen this year. This is the 3rd year we've had technology issues. And the first 2 times it happened led to them coming here and addressing us.
Well, there's 2 sides to every story. What is their side?
I actually just presented the facts
Thank you.
that they gave me.
Okay.
We can do further conversation. We can have further conversation. But if you're asking me what our steps are to take in mitigation, we had steps that we took last time, and we worked through those, and they had an effect on how much we paid on our contract, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, that's correct.
me.
So a couple of things, and then we'll, so as Valerie was sharing, there's multiple issues that we need to look at. One of the issues will be our DRC contract and what's occurred, because that's not acceptable. And it's not acceptable for a variety of reasons. Some may look at this and say, well, that was a small number of students impacted in different ways. Others will look at that and say, 1 student is too many students. So we will look at it from a variety of perspectives around the DRC contract, but the context that's important to think about is the context of we need to look at assessment as a whole. This is just a catalyst now as part of the process also to say, where are we going with assessment? Where are we moving forward? What do we want to see assessment look like? What does the legislature tell us that they want assessment to look like? Because that's in the mix at the moment. So assessment has become a priority topic for the tenant, for the committee, for the full board over the next couple of months, because it will impact what our recommendations are. How do we want to move forward in a variety of ways? We also have the unique opportunity of the change at a federal level, that we now can redesign some things that a year ago we couldn't have redesigned. And so we have an opportunity to think differently. We have a responsibility to address the issue with the contract, but we have an opportunity in that process also to determine, is there a better pathway for us to move, and what might that look like? In our committee discussion, Glenn had really some good discussion that I think is important. Now, I'm not sure why he didn't want to chair the assessment. That's another. Glenn and I had that issue, but anyway, as we think about the competency-based education, as we think about a lot of things happening, I think this actually is an opportunity for us, but we still have the reality. We have a contract with a company that did not fulfill its obligation, and so part of this will be, what are we going to do about that contract? Glenn, you had some comments?
I just was picking away at more than
As
the
former
detail.
chair of the tenant on assessment?
What percent are we complete then? Are we 90% complete?
We virtually are complete.
Virtually complete. And then I guess I had questions that might be better asked to DRC, but this router that went bad in the first part with the software bug, or whatever this, the January 21st incident, I'm guessing that bug didn't just appear suddenly. It had been there and they hadn't tested that, or did they replace that part? How did we suddenly wind up with a problem on January 21st in that piece of hardware?
I think that's a good question that we don't know the answer to.
Okay, I'm just thinking somebody must have replaced it, or maybe it was a latent defect that was in this router and then something bad happened that triggered that problem. And then the same question about what bug did they think they were fixing on the 28th? I guess they did fix one problem, but they created...
did. I actually can speak to that. We, some of our students, and it was a very limited number, if I were to ballpark it, I'd say 20, not that many, received a message that they had an invalid character. It was a pop-up, and it would not let the student continue. We are not exactly sure why this happened to these students, but they couldn't continue the test. And so the test would, DRC has to pull that test in and fix the invalid character and then reopen it so those students could finish their tests. There are some theories as to why this invalid character message was happening, and it might have something to do with toggling to another language on their keyboard, which is really easy to do in Chromebook.
By mistake.
But right, by mistake, or hitting something like an option. But your test software should prevent characters like that from coming in a different way than allowing them to come in and then stopping the student from testing. So they sent out a hotfix on Wednesday night to fix that, and that had some coding in it that wasn't supposed to go out, and that is what caused the spell checker and the dictionary to not work.
I guess we fixed a problem that was affecting 20 students and caused a problem for 4 hours for
we're
hundreds
all quite
of
aware of the
students,
irony
and
of that,
that
yes.
seems like a bad thing to
It
do.
is a very
Do we have any procedure to stop them from doing hot fixes? It seems like we should evaluate these problems. And
Well, I knew of the hotfix. I didn't expect another bug to be introduced. Our students that couldn't move forward because of the invalid character were, in my opinion, greatly inconvenienced. It took days for that test to be pulled in, for the invalid character to be removed. Our districts were very, very, they didn't like that. Whether it was a good idea to send out a hotfix or not, I would tell you right now, I would say no.
if we had hindsight 2020.
Right, but I would tell you, we've had hotfixes go out before, and they fixed the problem. I think we should be able to depend on the coding and the contractor to make those sorts of decisions. And I'm not a technology or a vendor in that way, and so go ahead, Jeremy.
So previously, when hotfixes have gone out, when DRC recommends that a hotfix goes out, they've already done a risk analysis to determine whether we should do that or we should not do that. And they only recommend them if they think that there's a low probability of that introducing any other problems. And so we obviously listen to their recommendations when they're making those. In the past, when they've made those recommendations, they've worked out well for us. And so it wouldn't be something that we would typically say. You do have to balance it, right? And so since they were making that recommendation, we thought that it was a good call at this time, and it turned out not to be, so.
Any other, Molly?
Yeah, I was, first of all, just going to say that we all know on our limited use of the computer that technology isn't always predictable. And the three issues really are the software bugs and then the writing server low on hard disk space. That was the huge problem from before. I mean, that was one of the biggest bugaboos. And the third one is the test engine update. When you look at the number of students involved, I think it reminded me when students think the test vehicle itself is unreliable, sometimes their blood pressure goes up, and that can skew the results as well. So, granted, technology has variability and there's some things you can't foresee, but are the tests reliable? We haven't discussed about that. Are they valid? Can students, when they go in to finish the test, can they redo what they did, or do they just
Sure.
start where they?
Yeah, they can do
so
that.
does that in itself create a variability in the test results?
Okay, so if we had a psychometrician, this is what would be my opinion on this. If we had a psychometrician look at this, they would say there was a limited effect of this test. I understand that. There are two issues at point here. One is individual students are affected when their test shuts down on them, let alone if they can't access the tools that they think they should. I happened to be out in a school district on Thursday morning. I was out observing a class, two different classrooms of about 50 students, and the students get nervous when their test freezes on them or disconnects them, and they have to enter when they have to go back in, because they really worry that their efforts will have been lost. And I guess we could say, well, that doesn't really affect them, but I think that I do think there is an effect on students. So I saw in this classroom, I truly experienced kids turn to me, because I'm the statewide assessment director, and said, it's going to be there, isn't it, when we go back in? And I said, oh, yes. And they were, but that has an effect on students. So 2 years ago, they determined that we put a caveat on our website, 3 years ago, excuse me. We put a caveat because of some technical issues that took place. We could not assure the 100% reliability and validity of the results, but that we felt we could release them. 2 years ago, we were unable to release them because we didn't have complete results. Okay, so that was all number one. Number two is a lot shorter. This is the third time with the same company that promised assurances, and most of all, that we provided leadership and met with our school representatives who on good faith also believed that our students would be served. And when I sent out the email after this, what I most noted is the effect on students and on teachers who were in those rooms and were dealing with these issues. And there is an effect on that.
You can use the test results?
I think those are that's premature yet in the process. I think we wanted to make sure everyone was, first of all, aware of what's happening. There's going to be lots of steps in the process, but to realize that this particular lemon is creating an opportunity for lemonade because of some of the other kinds of activities that happen to be happening at the same time. And so we just needed to make sure everyone is aware of what's happening with the issues on testing in DRC and the opportunities that we're going to be looking at as we go forward. Lily had a comment, and then I think, Pat, do you have a comment? So I'll let Lily go, and then you can think about it. So, Lily, did you still have a comment?
My blood pressure is skyrocketing.
Is it on?
It is now. I was on a committee where we had the opportunity to work with the company. They gave us the assurances. We trusted them. They have failed us. In turn, we as a board have failed the students and the state. We failed the teachers. It was not our intent, but to think that any of this data is worthwhile, I question. You just cannot expect kids to go in and to have the computer freeze. I mean, I cannot imagine the disorder that must have been existing in those classrooms. And the efforts, thank you, teachers, on your efforts to try and keep calm and order and to help kids be able to get back on the computer to try and redo the entries. But to think that any of this data can be used is valid, I don't understand how it could possibly be. It's totally an unacceptable situation. Third time for me, this is it. We have to go a new direction.
Pat?
I guess I feel very much the same way that Lily does on this one. I was skeptical, I think, at the time that we renewed this contract. I think there's a lesson for the board here. You know, I look at this computer here in my computer at home, and when it locks up, I'll tell you, my blood pressure goes up. I want to, you know, I've got a telephone in my pocket that locks up, and every time it does, I want to throw it out the window or step on it or do something. And I know it raises my blood pressure. And I think we do have some new opportunities given the recent ESA changes, and I think we got to look at that. But certainly, I think we got to learn from past experience on things like this. And this company, you know, they made us a lot of assurances, but we turned around and said, "Oh, we're going to give you a second chance." Well, maybe in retrospect, I guess we all learned a lesson here. Thanks.
Maureen?
Yes, I just need a piece of clarification. When it says the work was not lost, does that mean then the student was able to go back in and retrieve it and continue from there?
Yes, it is true that we do not believe any student work was lost.
Okay.
Because that work saves on a 15-second heartbeat.
Okay, thank you.
So, the good news is we have opportunities in front of us to really re-examine what we're doing, what our priorities are. And it will be a process that we engage our stakeholders.
Absolutely.
Teachers and administrators, I think parents, students. You know, we will in some way be gathering input as we determine a direction and what that direction looks like. I do believe that, from my view, this isn't just about the use of technology for assessment, because there are entities that have been very successful in that. But I think we have to be cautious and guarded and thoughtful about what our next steps are as we move forward around assessment. I think this gives us an opportunity, because of our schools that also give a national assessment as well as state assessment, to really rethink what level of impact is happening with assessment and what's some of our next steps and what should they be. Commissioner?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the final words, but the reality for us, as soon as we knew about this, we knew the reaction of the board would be as such. I would tell you my reaction was not as polite. So and Valerie's reaction was not as polite. The reality is we feel quite comfortable with it's time to explore a different direction for a lot of different reasons, all of those different reasons. The reality also is that we have to decide what companies can actually do for us and understand those limitations way up front. We have to also understand what's happening across the country as far as assessment practices and how it's benefiting our students, because that's what we would like to see. And so it does present us this opportunity. I mean, I would tell you that opportunity, for the most part, most of those pieces were in place. This was kind of pushes me over the top, perhaps, maybe on my blood pressure too, but pushes me over the top relative to the desire to move this forward. The timing of this from a board perspective is quite critical. We have to worry about the timing of how we get assessment done to meet the requirements that we have. We have to think through those things, and we'll build a plan. You'll probably hear more about, I guarantee you'll hear more about this by the time we get to the March meeting. Thank you to the assessment committee for taking a little bit of time. Thank you to Valerie and Jeremy for detailing this, and really thank you to our schools and others that took this on and helped address it. And yeah, beyond that, there's no other excuses.
Just a couple questions. Did we not ask for a considerable amount of money for continued or to develop the testing for this? We did that.
Yes, we did. In fact, one of the problems with this list of, or one of the issues for me with this list of problems is one of the enhancements that we actually paid additional money is one of the things that failed. I know that the spell check, the other things, we had enhancements over time that we paid extra for. And those were included in those promises about where we needed to go. And so, yeah, we're going to have some conversations with DRC. Here's the other reality, just so you understand. We also have an assessment window. This was just the writing assessment. We will be on to our reading, math, and science window as well in mid-March, or exactly what that time frame is. So we'll have other ways to evaluate the performance of DRC in this. My hope is that they take quite seriously that they're, even in that window, that they must fulfill this contract appropriately, and we'll be watching quite carefully.
And even if we end up maybe going in a different direction, for instance, with the 11th grade testing, for instance, we're still going to be faced with the other level of grades that we're going to have to basically deal with. Am I not right?
If I can add to that, one of the things that we talked about in our committee, our schools do additional testing. They use a national test right now. So you have schools using a national test and the state test. And so one of the things, when you talk about the balance and you talk about the reducing the burden, this gives us an opportunity, though in statute it says we're going to do both. It gives us an opportunity to really learn and understand, is there some success happening with the national test that an alignment, for example, could occur with our state standards? Are there things happening that we can reduce a burden of testing at the same time as we move forward? And then what does that mean operationally for our accountability, for AQuest? I think those are the things we have to explore. The disadvantage is we now have to kind of explore those now and quickly, rather than exploring those over a longer period of time, because we have to be responsive to our schools and ultimately to our students around this issue with the contract. So the contract is in essence a catalyst, and the challenges that have been created for us to maybe look at this in a more accelerated process than we probably would have. And so that's, I think, where we're at an interesting dynamic in the process, but we do need to determine what should that look like, and that's going to involve all of us in those discussions and key stakeholders. And I have to applaud Valerie and Jeremy for their work and what they've done, and they are going to be sending out some communication to schools and to communities that will reflect this conversation and reflect the work today, to let schools know that we're not taking this lightly on what's occurred, that this is a very serious situation to us, and that we believe it's very important for us to move forward in some capacity. And given all the other changes that are happening, it's really an opportunity for us. It really is an opportunity.
Is this is a surprise to me to see this today. Are we finding out about this, the board today, for the first time about that? Has the news media been aware of it? Because I don't know that I've seen anything in the news media. And if the news media isn't aware of it, they're aware of it right now. So I think it'd be
actually. So there was news and some press on this, and then we tried to send around some information. So if we somehow missed you, some information that Betty would have sent out around the assessment side of that. So.
Not to yeah, I think it was too full a little bit, but in your update as well.
Yeah, and I did do a little bit of an update, but.
And this is pretty much just in the works happening. So if you think about it in context, you know, it's really just evolved in this past week. And so it was critical and timely for us to have this conversation now and have the conversation with the full board.
I would like to address that as Vice President of Board. I learned about it this morning.
I do have one question for Valerie.
And when we heard this, then we took it to the domain assessment report. They heard it at that time, but in the morning meeting, 9:30 this morning, we said it does need to go to the full board.
I do believe the commissioner gave us a little bit of information to update, but not the detailed information that we have right now. I do believe that there was in the last update that you sent out, an information that just indicated that there were some, I can't remember how you worded it, but it seems to me, but there wasn't the detail that we received today.
One small thing, one time.
I do have one question for Valerie and Jeremy. When you actually are looking at what we own, NISA is created, and largely in part by our local teachers, curriculum directors, et cetera. I think we have a great standards, and NISA assessment are awesome. So this is my question. Do we own what we've produced? And if we disengage with DRC, do we still own the NISA assessments? Reading, writing, math, science?
We own all of the items that
Thank you,
have been
because
developed by our
check
Nebraska
for learning
educators.
and all that, if we switch boats, I just want to make sure we own what we've created.
That was part of the RFP and part of the contract, that our items that are developed by Nebraska educators belong to us. Yeah. So
Included in that, and part of the RFP, is that whatever company gets the RFP has to agree to work with any new subsequent company for those items to go to that new company. So that's part of the RFP and the contract, that they have to assist with moving those items from one company to the next at the end of that time. So we continue to own all of those things.
And in fact, we saw that in practice, because you probably don't remember this, but DRC was not the company that originally provided our Check for Learning. And so when they took that on as part of the full contract, there was a process by which Cal, which was the company that had it, passed all of that over to DRC. And so Jeremy's right, they do have an obligation to work together by the very contract that's set in place.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I don't did we send out anything to the press? Is the press aware of this before today?
Betty's.
Betty's everything.
Channel 7 KETV reporter contacted me.
I can't hear it. I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah, just come up. Come up, Betty.
So we did have some press on part of this. I don't know about the additional last week.
And when was it?
The only contact we had was, I believe, last Thursday or Friday. I'm not certain. Channel 7 KETV reporter contacted me and asked if we were having issues, that he had heard something. I was unaware of it. We didn't respond for 2 or 3 days because Valerie was out of the office and dealing with the issue. Ultimately, Valerie responded with a brief summary of what was occurring, but I don't think he did anything.
Right.
So the press, as far as I know, is not aware except for that incident.
Well, now that they are aware, I think it's incumbent upon the commissioner to issue a press release, and I think that press release should say that this board has expressed a great deal of concern and dismay over this.
Yeah,
And
so we can do that.
We can do that.
I mean, we've got an obligation, I think, to be very public about this in a response.
Yeah, and I actually have no problem with that. I really didn't want to issue a press release as such before having this conversation with you, so.
All right, and I do appreciate, I think Molly brought up a really important point also, and that's that we do, in essence, own the content of the test items. But I think for us also that we shouldn't just quickly move into looking for another vendor to disseminate the items we have. I think it's important we look at what's our assessment vision and direction, and I think that's the piece that Valerie has really described well today for us in thinking through some of those other elements that are going on right now. So, any other questions or comments? And again, I'd like to thank Valerie and Jeremy for their work and their diligence on this process. I know that it has been very difficult also for you. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Maureen, back to your overall domain. Is there anything else from the teaching and learning domain that any other highlights that you'd like to bring up? Then let's move on to another domain, and let's move on to student success and access. And I believe that John is reporting on that particular domain today. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Trust me, this will be a lot, if you will, shorter than your previous tenant, for sure. Student success and access. This morning we met. We were blessed to have the commissioner with us. We talked to our tenants on positive partnerships, transitions, and educational opportunities. We had a whole array of seasoned and experienced NDE personnel and board members. Pat was with us in the board, and basically we had an opportunity to talk to the commissioner about, in regards to when it comes to the reviews and updates, how he wanted them in regards to, can we ask more questions? Can we, what kind of, if you will, standards should we use in regards to when we make our reviews? And we were blessed to hear that basically we're going to work with 5 questions. How we make them longer, shorter, whatever the case may be, we'll make them work. And other ideas. We were very fortunate to have a few school districts provide us inputs in regards to, after their review of their, if you will, transitions, what they thought about it, and we'll be using those also. We are looking for feedback. There's no doubt about it. Rich Cott was there, and he brought up that for transitions, he was very interested in adding early childhood development and at-risk kids, kids that are, literally get lost in the system, leave school for some various reasons. What happens to them? How do we track them? That was one of the items we will be addressing in transitions. We had Brad address equal educational opportunities, and he addressed some GI Bill issues, degrees from community colleges, and the GI Bill. And we had Jolene brief us on security. Jolene, you want to take it from there?
I don't know that I really need to add anything other than I think one of the walkaways that I had is that in the EBA right now, we were seeing a gap of the transition between early childhood and K-12, and then K-12 and post-secondary. That within the EBA, we weren't maybe addressing some of the questions that we needed to get some of the data to help us identify what we were doing and what support we could provide schools for that. The other piece that came up that I think is important, and it was shared by several of the tenant groups, is that some of the questions seemed to be vague, and yes, school districts had a difficult time placing themselves on wherever they should land. And so the concept of maybe a rubric or something of that nature came up, of being a help to school districts. And as far as safety and security, I mean, we're moving ahead. It's a tough task, but we're developing some systems and working on that. I'd like to say that we're ahead of schedule, but
one other item that
sorry, but we're moving.
One other item that was significant with the whole group was the data, if you will, in regards to a lot of the oh, the young people that fall out at risk, whatever, how do we track them? Is there a mechanism within NDE where we track these people? And the commissioner took it upon himself to look into this.
Yeah, specifically dropouts.
Exactly.
To identify how we can support and identify resources that we can provide, or at least communicate to schools to help them support students who do drop out, so that maybe they can get into some kind of a support system to help them be able to complete a GED or something else to support them, so that we don't end up having a school to pipeline, prison pipeline.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I just wanted to thank Jolene and Ryan. They're going to provide that kind of facilitator role for the domain committees for the foreseeable future, I guess, and thank them for kind of taking that task on. Molly was unable to be there with us as she was trying to get through the blizzard conditions yet, or the road conditions out west, and Tim wasn't there. But I do thank the other staff members that were able to be there, and the focus on what our next steps are around the EBA in particular. So
We had some great discussion.
Great, thank you. All right, thanks. Next item is no report, I don't believe. Data and continuous improvement, is there a report for this meeting? No? Okay, then we're going to take 5-minute break before we move into policy. I know, I'm sorry, Maureen. We'll reconvene. We're gonna, oh, no, Glenn.
And I need
Okay.
Glenn, he's on the committee.
As we're looking for Glenn, we are just gonna make a minor change in the agenda and go with legislation and then policy, so that we can get, in case, we end up short of time, we can move some policy discussion tomorrow. Brian won't be with us tomorrow, so we need to get through our legislation today. And so that's the reason that we're making that change. So if we decide that time is running short, we can always move policy to tomorrow. So with that, Brian and Lily.
Yes. Thank you. And this is a progress, excuse me. I guess I'm still upset about the other. But at any rate, trying to move forward here with the legislative report. Committee consists of Molly, who has been on legislative, she tells me, since 2010. 12, okay, there you go. And how valuable, I'm mentioning that because the value in that is the historical perspective that she can give us. It's really valuable because this is my first time to be on the committee, John's first time, and Glenn's as well. So thank you for committee. And one of the things that was done earlier this morning was a review of times that we've had activities related to legislation, and in particular, our legislative retreat. And if you recall at that retreat, there were times with certain bills we said we would support, some we would support with testimony, and so on. So as a matter of fact, that list, and I'm sure you all have retained that list, is valuable to hang on to because it's your way of knowing what did we decide at that time about certain legislation. And in particular, we looked at back at 5 different bills today, and at Bill 1066, Sullivan's bill, we had asked staff to testify. Brian did so for us. We asked for Moorfield's 1026 to have testimony, and thank you very much, Matt. You testified for that. So there was immediate follow-through as requested by the board. There was one bill in particular that we were especially concerned about that we said we would hold on to for further discussion, and that's LB 930, Jim Shear's bill, and it's in regard to, I believe I've got the right number, don't I?
It's ACT one.
Oh, that's ACT, sorry, I'm sorry, it is Chris' bill, excuse me, 868, where?
826. Oh, no, that's.
868, correct? In regard to the civics test.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. One thing that, sorry about the confusion, I guess, too much going on this afternoon. But in regard to Chris' bill, we really appreciate the fact that he has brought this to our attention, the importance of civic education, and there has been significant follow-through by the department looking into the social studies requirement standards that were put in place in November of 2012. Was that right, December? At any rate, we do appreciate the fact that that has been brought to our attention, and as a result, we had lengthy discussion about this particular bill. And the end result, with unanimous agreement by the committee, was to put this particular bill, and if you still have your printout, it was the one that was on page 4. And that we would be neutral on it but with testimony. And that motion was made by Molly, seconded by Glenn, and John and I agreed to it as well, that this is what we recommend to the board. If I can remember everything. Our recommendation, as it is the civics.
That isn't mine. 868, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Number different? I've got page 5 on.
Yeah.
It's on page 4.
Yeah, it
It
depends
starts
on
on
which
the,
printout I think
on page
that
4,
you have.
continues on 5, so. No.
And part of the reason also why this is fitting for this bill, when you say neutral, that gives the connotation that we're not interested. That's not the case. We're interested in this bill. We're interested enough that we're saying with staff technical testimony, or with testimony being given by Brian to the Education Committee. This bill is written in such a way that it's directed to school districts to implement. It's not a bill that guarantees feedback to the State Department with the performance of kids on it. So there are all these kinds of issues. Now I asked Brian if he would clarify what I've been trying to outline here. And
Well,
that you will testify for this on our behalf February the 16th on a Tuesday afternoon.
In neutrality?
Yes.
Neutral?
Appear in a
Yes.
neutral capacity.
With testimony.
With testimony. And I will tell you that the legislative committee spent about an hour just talking about the bill and all of the pieces and the components and civics education.
Okay.
If nothing else, the exercise was demonstrating a level 4 depth of knowledge on civics and all of that. It was Harris Payne, who was our social studies consultant, was there because at the last board retreat, there was a question about, well, how well does this test line up with our social studies standards? So he and Corey Epler actually provided all of the committee members with the 100 questions from that test, also with the possible correct answers to those questions, and not all those questions have a single answer as part of that. They did a review of the social studies standards and found that every one of those questions could be found in the social studies standards. The overwhelming majority of those questions connected at a minimum to the 5th grade level of social studies, but also at the 12th grade. In that regard, there were some that ask about who's your governor or who's your president, and our social studies standards for Nebraska have Nebraska history 4th grade. So they did a very good job of taking the questions, aligning the social studies standards to it. They also used a depth of knowledge in that, and looking at how well does this require. I believe the document, every question had a depth of knowledge of 1, which is the lowest level. Most of our NISA tests are 1, 2s, and 3s. We have no 4 on the NISA in that regard. So there was a great deal of discussion just on that topic. There was discussion about, yes, there's a need for kids to know some basic facts, but that civics education is more than just knowing facts. It's also engaging in more analytical thinking, critical thinking, and that. So, like I said, it was about an hour discussion. Valerie Foy was there because that part of this came up with, well, the test that is mentioned in the bill, is that a good assessment to judge, and are there better ways in which you can gather knowledge about this? The fact that you've, as a board, supported LB 101 from last session, which called for college and career standards and testing system that measures college and career readiness, and LB 930, which was the bill to have at the 11th grade a college admission test.
Both ACT and SAT provide reports off of theirs that are tied back to social studies in that regard. So there is a vehicle, should they go forward with that legislation, to get some feedback if those tests are utilized as to how well our students are doing on our social study standards and on the test. I think the conversation was very good. Towards the end of it, I just said, well, do you appreciate that Senator Christ introduced the bill? And everybody unanimously said yes. And I think the reaction was, but they think there's a better vision for assessment than this graduation test. Number one, they wanted to be neutral, be supportive of Senator Christ bringing the bill so that the state can have the conversation about civics and what other opportunities we have going forward to actually have meaningful information about what students do know on civics and on our social studies standards. So that was kind of the sum and substance of the conversation, but I'll again defer back to the 4 board members who were there, because trying to capture that hour's discussion in that brief summary, I'm sure I may have missed a few of the points, but hopefully I gathered most of it. So
also the process would be, as in others, that we determine as a full board what direction we want to go. So Lily, did you have?
I'll move on behalf of the committee that we take this position as the board on this particular bill, 868, that our position be that of neutral with staff testimony.
It's a motion. Is there a second? Yeah, there needs to be a motion and a second. So we have a motion and a second, so now we can move into discussion. So again, similar to our retreat, we follow up on the process piece and make a full board motion recommendation. Pat?
I'm going to vote no on this. We do not have any test that any 12th grader is required to pass in order to graduate. If they, we keep hearing the fact that we've got kids that we're graduating that can't read their own diploma. You listen to the shows, maybe I listen to too much talk radio or too much TV talk, but when you go out and hear somebody ask a college student or a teacher, how many Supreme Court judges are there? And they respond, I think about 150. How do they get elected? Or how do they get there? Well, I think they get elected. I don't think it is too much to expect a high school graduate, to be able to pass the same test in order to graduate that a aspirant, a citizen has to pass in order to become a citizen of the United States. And I don't always get along with Senator Christ, but I think he's right on this one, and I'm going to vote no on this motion because I think, frankly, we should support it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other comment? Maureen?
My feeling towards this bill is it's just one more high-stakes graduation requirement test. The one thing I did like what I heard from the committee was that the standards were already matching up as to what was going on. So, because one of the things I felt was another high-stakes graduation requirement, rather than improving our standards or working on improving instruction to the professionals in the classroom of what is already required in a government class. While I can probably negotiate and go with neutral, I really am opposed and am opposed to being against it, period.
Glenn, and then Molly.
These two people reflect kind of the discussion in the committee.
Yeah.
I think if this is not really a high-stakes test, I mean, the bar is about yay high. If you cannot answer these simple questions, we miss something somewhere along the line. And I'm not sure that we need a test that measures deeper knowledge about civics, because you could do a lot of civic projects around town and still not know how many members are on the Supreme Court. Some of these facts, you know, there was somebody said, well, the Milken Award winner. I'll take issue with, they can Google up any fact on their phone. Okay, well, you've got to know some stuff in order to be able to know where to look. You've got to have a few facts stuck in your head somewhere, and if we haven't accomplished that by the time you're in 12th grade, we've failed you. But on the other hand, I can sympathize with Maureen's point that, you know, this will probably, if it is implemented, just be one of these joke things where they, you know, keep taking it until they finally clear that hurdle, and that doesn't really achieve the purpose either. So I'm sympathetic with Senator Chris' point of view. I'm also concerned that we owe our students a better civics education than just breezing through these 100 questions and until they can answer it and then forgetting about it and moving on.
I'll try to say this in a very concise manner. A lot of the conversation throughout the United States right now is preparing kids for college, career, but also civic life. People want graduates not just to be out for themselves and to go and do what they want to make money. They want people that know what it means, what are your rights, your responsibilities as an American. And in our conversation for that hour, we really talked about what do we want. And I'd like to remind you a little bit about the Millikan Educator of the Year. When she said, kids, if you just come in and teach these facts and they regurgitate them and they pass, that isn't a test that stimulates them to really invest in innovation and science as a lifestyle. So back to the civics test. I hope they're talking about this all over the state. In our committee, we said, instead of just having it in the end as a rubber stamp, we need to make sure that it's invested in our social studies standards. And I asked Harris Payne to mail each of you where it relates. Every single question relates to standards. It's in our social studies standards. But also, we want it to be related to AQUEST. So if we're going to do system-wide reform, let's stick to the system we're building. And what if we can give people benefits at their local district to show that not only they learning civics, and I think Corey Epler called it service learning, where they're actually working together as civic citizens and doing things for their communities. I said I wouldn't be averse to have this test be given in 5th and 12th grade, and it could be an EBA, evidence-based analytic, how to boost your score from failing or needs improvement, good, great, excellent. Because what if actually you didn't just memorize the answers, but you understood why they were important? So our robust conversation was, instead of making it another test, why don't we really take it seriously that we want our kids civically engaged and involved? So that's my comment, and that's why we're neutral, but we do want to testify. And I think, if you don't mind, Harris Payne is sending you 5 digital articles, and you can take the civics test, and then you can also see how it relates to our standards. And then he had some great principles about what the 6 things students need to know to become civic ready. And I love that talk because I think that's important.
Maureen, did you have a comment?
Well, and Molly just already addressed it, it's always, our teachers are already saying and our students are already saying we're over-tested. And so then this is one more test.
And I'll just, I think that's what we discussed in our assessment committee earlier as well. That's another piece of the puzzle that can be looked at as we review and determine the vision for assessment as part. So we had that discussion. And I do think one other piece that for me is problematic is it's putting another mandate in that is somewhat disconnected to the system as a whole. And I think the more we do that, the greater fragmentation that we have within the system. And so I think being neutral, but also sending a message that it's important that we want to look at civic education and what it should look like is important. With that, Denise, do you want to call the roll, please?
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
No.
and Patricia Tim. So we have 6 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
In regard legislative, at the NASB Monday morning conference, a presentation was made by Brian about the new Every Student Succeeds Act. And so it is a superb explanation, and so, in my opinion, merited being sent to all of you. So if you go out to a school or something and they want to have an explanation, what does it mean to our school? What are we expected to do? What is the purpose of it? This has all the answers. And so thank you very much for making this available to us and for doing such a class presentation Monday. And Molly was there to hear it too. It was probably, you can
As was
address
John.
as to how the reception was to that.
Okay, quick question. Did we have any other bills we need to talk about
That
that
was
are
the
gonna
only
be
bill
having
that the-
hearings before we
Nope, that
meet
was
again?
that
There's
was
not.
the only bill.
Okay, but I just didn't know if there were
Right.
any others that we needed to address before
That was
our
the
next
only
board
one
meeting.
the legislative committee recommended the board take a position on, so that's it at this point. And for the board members, you do have attached under the legislative committee report, you have the bill analysis document that was updated as of yesterday's action with all of your board positions in it. The second document, that's the state board overview of legislation, that has all the bills you had taken positions on prior to just a few moments ago, telling you where those bills also are at. And then the last attachment is that PowerPoint presentation with 14 slides. I wished it explained 1,000 pages worth of legislation, but it's a big picture view. So those are the documents that are there for you to look at. So, and we will continue to update the board analysis document as the legislature keeps moving, because today they completed their 20th day, so there's only 40 days to go. And next Tuesday, I would tell you, we have our hearing before the Appropriations Committee, so the commissioner will be there answering questions about the budget that you submitted last fall that was submitted to the Appropriations Committee. So that's all I have.
Has there been some discussion on 9:30 with the senators, with either a testimony or discussion?
Well, there was the hearing on LB 930 that the commissioner testified on, and
In favor? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that I heard from a couple staffers that they were grateful for the testimony and they found it helpful.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's work ongoing on that. Education had an executive session this week, and for the first time this session advanced some bills from committee. Those were the ones they heard their first day, so we expect they'll be getting to that topic in the next week or so.
Molly?
I just wanted to comment, Brian, your slideshow, I hope you take time to look at the PowerPoint that's included. But what I really liked about it is it showed that it wasn't the federal government micromanaging us, and you really made it clear that AQuest is lock and step with giving us state freedom to respect local rights.
I think my message was the federal government recognizes you should be leading on legislation, not them, so.
Glenn?
Ryan, I just wanted to ask you about, in your slideshow, you're talking about school districts must develop comprehensive plans, support and improvement plans for schools identified in that lower 5%. And then after a state-determined period of years, not to exceed 4 years, states must take more rigorous action if a school identified for comprehensive support and intervention has not met exit criteria. So it seems to me like this is going to become a full-time job. I mean, you're always going to have the bottom 5%. No matter how good you are, there's always going to be the bottom 5%. And so we're going to be perpetually coming up with these comprehensive support and improvement plans, and if you can't become Harvard, then you're probably going to have new support. So have we created a new,
Well, that's
problem here?
That's the language in ESSA. What we're waiting on is what the U.S. Department of Education is going to propose in regulations to do that. The difference is it is the local school districts that put together the plans to meet their own needs, as opposed to the Secretary of Education telling school districts you must use one of these models. So, but the plan that has to be submitted to the U.S. Department of Education is the plan you're going to be working on with all the policy partners and getting input, because it's really going to be your plan that goes to the Secretary of Education about how in Nebraska we will do that in that process. So that's why it's back right here to start work on that and making the decisions. They're not easy ones. If you remember your AQuest classification from December, about 8% of the schools were in needs improvement. The federal government is saying you just need to have 5%. So you've already set a little higher standard of what you're expecting, and the whole point of AQuest is not just the 3 priority schools, but all schools and districts and everybody getting better. So that's part of the ongoing work. That's why I think ESSA really fits right well inside AQuest. There's still work to do. There's a lot of work that's going to have to come about. You have in there a projected timeline as to when we may start seeing from the U.S. Department of Ed their proposed regs and everything else, which will flesh out even more of the details of what they're expecting. But yeah, it's not just, oh, we don't have to pay attention to this all. There's work to do, but the fact of the matter, the work starts here and then goes to D.C., as opposed to No Child Left Behind, where it started in D.C. and we were told we shall comply.
Commissioner, and then
And I'm just going to, I guess, probably echo a few of those comments. Here's our other reality. What we're trying to build with AQuest is that every school is working on their improvement plan based on what we put in Rule 10. And so I want that system to actually come together so we don't have to create something different for schools, that schools generally are following the procedures that would be about school improvement based on what we've laid out as a framework for accountability, but also a framework for school improvement. And so I would like to see us be able to pull together all those different things that I watch at the federal level, title school improvement plans, different improvement plans out of, I don't care if it's Perkins or something else, that we're really consolidating, so to say, that work. And so we have a plan that actually starts to meet all those requirements. And I think that's possible within it, but we won't know until the regs come out.
Question in regard to that. A lot of our schools already have plans for continuous improvement that are either frameworks or advanced ed. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. When we go to our 3 schools, we're going to say, what do you have in place already? And then we'll work with them. But part of that too gets back to that conversation about specific EBAs. I know with advanced ed, they have specific details about how to improve. I hope we're not going to make schools have 2 different tiers of continuous improvement, that we can integrate, whether they're framework or advanced ed. So the burden again is on the local school, but we're there to support and provide expertise and advice, but not just to take it over or flip them.
But I think it's important in that process to ensure that there are results.
Well,
and
not
there's
that it's on the
accountability.
shelf and accountability.
And
yeah.
so I think that's a part of the process, is a different level of support, in the sense that there's support and accountability. And you may have a program that's aligned with school improvement process or advanced ed, but if it's not working, then something needs to change. And I think that's part of the intervention team's role, is going to be to come out and help provide some of that guidance and input to see that the continuous plan that's in place, whether it's their existing plan or a plan that may need modification, is going to have some positive results. So.
I just hope that as this goes on, I know next week we're going to be meeting in Taylor for Loop County Public Schools. And I hope whatever we do, again, is not there to punish or to say you're doing it all wrong or you put this on the shelf, but that we're there to work with them and listen to them. Because I think the other schools that are in that the needs improvement category are going to be watching how we treat and how we intervene. So I do agree with you, Rachel.
But
something's not working, or they wouldn't be a priority school. But I just hope that we go in with respect for what they are doing and seeing if they're following through on the advice of the last visiting team.
Well, I think it goes beyond that, Molly, and I think that's where we, as our role as board members, different from the board and the staff role, our role ultimately is going to be to approve those plans. And so there's a different role that we will be playing in that process that I think over time is going to be critical for us to think about our role, because our role is really, in some respects, will be supporting the plan that the department in partnership and the intervention team in partnership with that school came together. So I think we have kind of an interesting role in this process of really understanding, does that plan, when it comes to us, do we feel confident that that plan is going to have an impact? So I think at some point we'll probably have to have more discussion about how we as board members are engaged in the process at our board level, different than from the staff level, because we ultimately approve the plan.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, I think in that, when you get that chance to approve plans, those are becoming models that we're evaluating on whether or not they're going to work in other places as well. And so I envision that process being quite important. It might inform us on what we think Rule 10 changes would have to be in the future around school improvement and what we've done for supports for schools. And so that process is almost like an action research environment right now. But we're going to learn from that and then try to scale. And I think that's the difference compared to what just simply passed in the legislation in LB 438 a couple of years ago. We're actually trying to build something that accommodates school improvement for a broader set of schools, not just 3 places. That the importance of that, remember that map view that I gave you, different types of needs improvement schools. So when we walk in each one of those priority schools right now, that we're not just there to help them, but to also think, what's this represent in helping the other schools as well. So it's very good, and I think I feel like we have a really energized team around that, and so doing that work is important, and making sure that we put something together, the board then goes, this is something we can approve, we understand, and this is how it's going to impact schools across the state.
All right, we are going to move on, if there's nothing else on legislation, on to policy. As we discussed earlier, Pat Tim was not able to be with us today. And so I tried to chair the policy committee. Here we go. I would like to thank, first of all, the team that's on the policy committee. Maureen and Pat McPherson are on that committee. And I'd like to thank the staff, Scott and Margaret and Scott and Don Lynn and Brenda, who also are really pivotal for the discussion of the policy committee. We did accomplish approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Since none of us were at that meeting, we felt those minutes looked fine. From there, we had quite a discussion, and I'd like to just kind of touch base on some of the work that we'll have going forward. We discussed the 4-year review of State Board Policy G6, which is on virtual education, and we decided to move that to June for a couple of reasons that I think were really well-founded reasons. One, to really get a little bit further along in our strategic planning process to see what relationship or interface there may be with that particular policy in our strategic planning process, as well as to get some additional information on current impact that policy is having either within the department or in schools. And so we'll come back in June and review that policy. Our next was the State Board Policy on G19, Standards Assessment and Accountability. And again, we decided to move that to June also. We could have said July, but and a part of that again is because we want to look at the relationship of strategic planning and the policies that have been put into place with AQuest and really determine, is there even a need for that particular policy going forward, and we thought June would be a good time to come back to that piece. Next, we discussed revisions to State Board Policy B12. Pat, who was not able to be with us, had some comments on that particular policy, so we felt that since she's chair of the committee, we'll just put that off till March, and she can bring forward the discussion and some of her comments on that particular board policy. We had the commissioner join us for our discussion on State Board Policy B5, which is board committees. And that led into a really in-depth discussion about how we move forward with some board committees, and felt, again, the strategic planning process would be important in how we look at board committees going forward. But we did determine that there are 2 ad hoc committees that we think are important to start immediately, and those may move into standing committees. We had a lot of discussion about which committees should be moved into a standing committee as opposed to ad hoc as we go forward, and that discussion will continue going forward. But the 2 ad hoc committees, we are going to add a ad hoc committee that we haven't really named yet, but it will be something related to human resources and personnel, because one of our responsibilities is looking at personnel rules as a board, and so we felt there could be some value, and we are just going to ask, and John has graciously agreed to the Commissioner Appraisal Committee will also serve in that role for that particular ad hoc committee that will be named by our next meeting, but we'll be dealing with human resources and some of our responsibilities around the personnel rules. The other ad hoc committee is a ad hoc committee for budget and finance. Since we do start the development process of the budget now, our discussion was that that really is an important committee for us to have as a part of the discussion. So as we move forward in those processes, we can really have a deeper understanding and have more in-depth discussion at a committee level around budget and finance. So with that particular ad hoc committee, I'm seeking any volunteers. So if you're interested, let me know after the meeting or shoot me an email if you are interested in serving on that ad hoc committee. I know it adds another committee to your schedule and to your plates, but if it's something that you would really like to serve on, please let me know, and we'll get that committee established and announced at our March meeting. Our next item was on the staff research and assistance. I'm going to skip and come back to that in just a minute. We also discussed board policy B7, which is on board member expenses, and that also led into a discussion on B21, state board member code of conduct. And we feel there's additional information that needs to be gathered, though we appreciate a lot of the information that was brought forward relative to the Nebraska Constitution and statutes that address that particular policy. We felt there was some additional information that we need to have and start to really gather some additional concepts and language that would help us take a look at what do we want to see reflected in B7. And because B21 has a comment or a section around continuing education for board members, we felt it was important that we have an alignment discussion between B21 and B7 as we move forward. And so that will be on our agenda next month for the policy committee to continue to discuss. So then back to B19, which is staff research and assistance. The commissioner came in and talked a little bit about that particular policy, and there's 2 things that are going to happen with that policy. One, a commissioner will talk a little bit about that policy and highlight some of the elements within that policy yet today. But then we did find in that particular policy not really significant change of substance, but some clarifying language that we think is important in that particular policy. We think the substance for the most part of that policy is still on target, and so we want to talk a little bit about the key elements of substance in that policy, and then we'll be bringing back to you probably the proposed language in March for changes on B5 with us to take action in April on B5. So Commissioner, did you want to talk a little bit about, or excuse me, B19?
Yeah, B19. So on B19, this is actually about staff research and staff assistance. And one of the things that I've kind of added to the scenario now, and as we're kind of moving forward, Donlin becomes a important point of contact. But the policy itself says that, you know, requests for board or for staff research, for staff interactions would go through the commissioner's office. What I want to kind of be able to clarify, I'll probably send you an email with something that says here are the contacts that you might want to make to be able to do that work. One of the discussions, and it was helpful I think in the committee, was that we've done a lot of different things with, you're now engaging with staff through the committee structures and other things. And so I want to encourage that, but I also want to make sure that we kind of pin the specific conversations that need to come to the commissioner's office by making that request through the commissioner's office. So whether that's, I mean, so if that's something that's not related to the committees, that somehow we make that request through my office. What I can tell you, and I have great staff, that they will jump when you ask them a question. I mean, they really will. They'll jump and try to do that. But sometimes they have to know what that priority is. And I wanted to be able to use this and say, hey, look, this is what our current board policy is, and I appreciated the conversation. If you think this continues to be how we would function and work, then I'll make sure to communicate the processes that I would hope we can now follow. There have been a lot of changes, and so having Donlin, having me, having probably Denise gets to answer the phone, I know a lot, that we can filter those types of requests that are outside of our other committee work through that. And then we'll try to keep contacts and processes in place so you know. And I appreciate the staff when they jump, they go, oh, here's a whole new issue for us, Commissioner, how do we handle that? And I'm going, oh, I missed that one, didn't pay attention to how, whatever may happen. There's some need for us to kind of organize that work. And so that's why I think it's important to look at this policy and just kind of review that. And then I'll work on my side, make sure that we get that communicated, both with staff and with you, so you know where to make contacts.
So just to reiterate what the commissioner's saying and what I think our committee felt that was very important on this particular, the substance we believe is critical. Few changes for clarifying, but you know, it leads off that says all requests by board members for research or other assistance by staff should be routed through the commissioner's office, and that being the commissioner, Denise, to contact the commissioner or Donlan. And so when we talk about research, that's if you, or requests, that's if you have a question. Again, that those things go to the commissioner, not directly to staff. And I think that's the piece that this is really reinforcing, that our responsibility is to go through the commissioner's office and not to staff, because staff, as he said, they'll do their best to respond, but really we have a process and policy, and we think this process is still a good process. So we'll come back to this again in March and April with a little bit of language changes for clarifying, but the intent or substance of this policy, I think our committee felt is still appropriate. Pat or Maureen, did you have anything to add for the committee as a whole or on any of the topics we've discussed?
You did it. You did a splendid job.
I second that.
It's a great committee, and we did accomplish approving the minutes, so we did get something done. So if Pat's listening, she'll know she has a lot of work carried over as well. With that, I think we are moving now to our report outs on our two subcommittees or ad hoc committees, teacher principal evaluation and competency-based education. Is there anything, Molly, that you want to report out today?
Yes, I did want to let you know that our committee is comprised of Lily Larson and Mo and Pat and myself on the board, and Sharon Cott, Dennis McGuire, Donlin Rice is our fearless leader, and then Brian and Matt and Deb Friesen kind of come in and out when they have time. I did want you to know we're taking this very seriously. As you know, in the No Child Left Behind, teacher principal evaluation was a huge problem for a lot of states because they said they would link teacher evaluation to how well kids did on their tests, their state tests. Nebraska never did that, and we're not recommending that we start that. However, we do know that a good teacher evaluation will retain good teachers, and it'll help support those new teachers and some of our established ones. We are going to make a report to the full board in March, and from my committee members, you have that document. Please look it over. And tomorrow we'll be discussing that to make sure it's our voice and Donlin has captured what we really recommended. And then the second part is just talking about what we've been doing in depth with teacher principal evaluation models and just some of the terminology. So Madam President, we will be making recommendations on our final report next month.
Excellent. Thank you, Molly. Glenn, do you have a report for competency-based education?
Oh, sure. So the committee is made up of John Whitzel, Pat Tim, Rachel, and Corey Epler, Rich Cott, Janine Thaler, and Katie Graham, who's back from maternity leave, I guess. Yeah. And we've got a lot of irons in the fire. I think Ryan can speak to some of those things. We need more detail, but I'll just try and summarize. We've put out an application for people to join our competency-based education study group that's going to be moving forward with some pilots. I'm not sure that's the word we approved of. We're going to go tour Westside Elementary School, where they're doing some competency-based education or blended learning in March. So come on up, Ryan, and bail me out of a tight spot.
We've shared with you a few times the work of the Competency-Based Education Study Committee, and on Monday launched this exploratory project for local schools to engage in a year of professional learning that we would support around competency-based education to help them then implement those strategies over the next 3 years so that we could continue to get feedback and provide a framework for local schools to help support them if they choose to implement competency-based education strategies. The response has been overwhelming from local schools, and I think it's safe to say that schools in each of your districts have responded with interest in that. And so I think that at the March or April meeting, we'll provide those final recommendations, or the study committee will provide those final recommendations to the full board, which will include the schools that will be selected that will support in that professional learning.
Okay.
Thank you, Ryan.
The end of your report. Thanks, Ryan.
All right. That's all we have for you.
Thanks, Glenn. We do have one other item just to touch base on before we adjourn. And that item is a little bit of a procedural item impacting how we address action items during our business meeting. And so with that, I'm going to turn over to the commissioner, who's going to let you know kind of how we're moving forward with a change in procedure with action items.
Yeah, and I described this to the policy committee, but I think there's no reason, we don't need any policy to be able to do this. It's really just more a process issue. You'll notice that on our, when we're taking action, we have our work session and then our regular meeting. When we take our regular meeting things, we have a lot of staff that show up to kind of awkwardly present to you and then try to get a motion out there. My preference would be that a board member would make a motion and someone would second. And then for our discussion's sake, we'll have staff available if we think that we're going to need them for discussion, that then they could come up for questions or anything. But I think just process-wise, it's probably a lot cleaner just to go ahead and make the motion. It's pretty much in there. We'll start to try to keep track, make sure we get the motion language appropriately on the agenda and in your system, so you can simply read the motion, ready to move forward with it. Then if I think it's proper, get the second, then have discussion and pull up a staff member. Otherwise, we kind of have folks going, well, I was here yesterday and I'm repeating the same things again. And I think it'll be just a lot cleaner and a lot more appropriate for us as we proceed.
And as we move into that process, it becomes our discussion then during the work session, really becomes important, because that's when we really want to have that discussion. But certainly the staff will be available if there's a need for any discussion when we address those action items during the business meeting. Glenn?
So this is going to kind of open up Friday morning, if I understand this. We're just going to zip right through these.
It gives us two options. One, depending upon the number of hearings that we always have that. It also gives us that opportunity, as we had last month, we may be able to use that presentation time as well during our business meeting. And it gives us more opportunity if we have committees that need to meet yet. So it gives us flexibility in that Friday, but it also isn't necessarily duplicating what we've already just done today. So a part of it is really just a level of efficiency, I think, in our processes. So I thought it was a good suggestion the commissioner had. Pat?
Not only efficiency in our time, but efficiency in the time of the staff who don't need to be here making another presentation a day later.
Mm-hmm. Any questions, Lily?
One thing, though, that has occurred in the past is there have been some questions that have come up on that Friday. So if they're not going to be returning and somebody does have a question, then I think the procedure would be to give it to you, Commissioner, and then for an answer, and it could be presented to the full board the next day. Here are questions that have developed, and I think I like that arrangement, because sometimes when I go home, I go back through all of this, and I think, I wish I'd asked that question. So if that would be permissible, I feel comfortable with what you recommended, but have a way in which to get
To communicate
additional.
it to us, yeah.
I don't think there was any intention to preclude necessary questions or discussion the next day. But so much of what we hear is just a repeat without questions, and
But the staff person was not going to
but
be
the
here.
And the staff person will be called if
Right.
necessary. So I just think it makes everything much more efficient for everybody
I'm trying
concerned.
to really make it efficient with this suggestion.
Well, we did discuss it. It's not like the staff people have the day off.
Right.
So they will be available and called when questions come up. So I do think that is kind of a good compromise. Glenn?
I mean, this sounds like a reasonable thing to do, but I'm just wondering about the agenda for Friday then. That's going to be pretty fluid. We may or may not be carrying things over from the work session. Does that get in the way, or?
Oh, well, let me back up just a little bit. We'll still have all those items on the Friday. They will all still exist. So it's just a matter of the board will make a motion in a second, and then if we need additional discussion with the staff, they'll be here. You'll still hear from them on Wednesday, or on the Thursday work session, if that's, maybe I misunderstood.
But then we may pass it Thursday without further discussion.
No.
Oh,
We'll
the
take
action's gonna-
action at the business meeting.
Yeah, we'll-
So,
okay.
An example would be tomorrow, that if you would look at item 6 on our agenda, which is adopt the proposed revised Rule 1, someone would make a motion. We wouldn't have staff come forward. A board member would make a motion, something to the effect of, I move to adopt revised Rule 1, rules and regulations, and read the item. So the item is there, put the item in a motion, there's a second, we have a discussion. If during that discussion, someone says, I really had a question for Bryce about this, we get Bryce in, whether Bryce may be sitting in the audience already and just wait, and if there's no questions. So we'll work through a process. It might take us a little bit of time, but I think in the long run, it will really get to the efficiency and make us really come prepared on our Thursdays to ask all the questions that we have. Try to really be prepared for Thursdays.
I was just gonna say that tomorrow I'll just have staff come like normal, but they'll be here. But let's try it tomorrow. They'll be here ready to answer questions. Let's just try it tomorrow just to see if we can get into that routine. They won't have to come up to the table until there's a motion and second.
Okay. Molly, did you have a question?
Teammates, one thing I do want to say to each of us, if we're going to do this on Friday when we have our meeting, sometimes we get a little lazy and just say, so moved, and someone says second, and if we're not the work session, you don't know what's being passed. So I would request on Friday at in our actual meetings, we actually say what the motion is, and if you're the one that makes the motion, Robert's Rules of Order suggests you say why you moved passage. So if I wasn't here the day before, I'd kind of get a gist of what the motion is about. I'm just saying that if we abbreviate this too much, we're not really doing service to people that only listen to our meeting.
Lily?
That was my question, if this is in compliance with Robert's Rules of Order.
It will be if you state the full motion, and that is, as Molly pointed out, once in a while, because the staff have basically stated the language, we just move what the staff shared with us. This puts actually the responsibility back on us, which is where it needs to be. So that's a part of the process as well. Any other comments or questions? If not, then we move to adjournment. The regularly scheduled meeting of the State Board of Education will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow in this room. Thanks, everybody. It's a great day.